Chapter 542. Yi Hongyu did not say anything. She just looked at him quietly. Ning Ke looked at her and continued, Long Qing's survival will do no good to the West Hill Divine Palace or the Tang Empire. I have no way to kill him now, so I need you to do it yourself. Yi Hongyu suddenly said, Since he has betrayed the Divine Hall, he will not be able to survive in Haotian's world. So he will definitely leave the Central Plains and enter the wilderness. Ning Ke said, That is what I am worried about. The wilderness is boundless. If he hides in Tianqi Mountain with the fallen knights, who can find him? But if he wants to leave the Central Plains and enter the wilderness, he has to pass through the Yan Kingdom. I don't think Long Qing and his subordinates can do it. Yi Hongyu said, Because you have forgotten that there is someone in the Yan Kingdom. Compared to us, that person is the one that Long Qing wants to kill the most. Correspondingly, that person also wants Long Qing to die the most. You mean Crown Prince Chongming? Ning Ke only then realized that the West Hill Divine Palace had already made arrangements, but he still felt that it was not reliable. He frowned and said, Even if Crown Prince Chongming can control the cavalry of the Yan Kingdom, they are still ordinary people. I don't think he has the ability to kill Long Qing. Yi Hongyu said expressionlessly, Even if he can't kill him, he can at least delay him for a while. Ning Ke understood something and said, Delay is to wait for someone to arrive. Yi Hongyu said, Exactly. Ning Ke looked into her eyes and said, You go personally. Yi Hongyu looked back at him calmly and said, I will go personally. Ning Ke immediately heaved a sigh of relief and said, Goodbye. Yi Hongyu raised her eyebrows and said, It seems that you don't want to see me in front of you. If it were any other time, I would be very willing to make a pot of good tea, cut a few plates of beef, and have a long talk with you. But I am really anxious now. No matter how good the tea is, it should not go with beef. It should go with liquor. As a disciple of the headmaster of the academy, you actually made such a mistake. It seems that you are really anxious. Ning Ke looked down at his boots and thought of the blood that the boots had stepped on yesterday. He said, Yesterday in front of the Red Lotus Temple, Long Qing said that he might be the son of Yama. Hearing this, Yi Hongyu smiled. Her smile had a complicated meaning. She looked at Ning Ke and said, Now everyone in the world is guessing that you are the son of Yama. But because there is no evidence, neither the Haotian Taoism nor the Buddhism sect has done anything. But you are saying that Long Qing is? Ning Ke looked up and spread his hands and said with a smile, At least from the stories over these years, Long Long is more like the son of Yama than me, because he is darker and more miserable than me. Than me. Yi Hongyu said, This does not prove anything. You must know that the reason why everyone is guessing that you are the son of Yama is because the former divine priest of light used his eyes to discover you in Chang'an. Ning Ke said, But what he saw may not be true. In fact, the West Hill Divine Palace denied his opinion. The Abbey Dean put him in the U prison. Yi Hongyu looked at him quietly. After a long silence, she suddenly said, But have you ever thought that if the divine priest of light was wrong, why would Haotian Taoism have such a strong reaction? Why did the Abbey Dean come back to the human world and put him down personally? I don't know what happened back then, but I have a feeling that it is not so simple. Most things in the world are simple or complicated. The reason why the Abbey Dean suppressed Wei Guangming in person was that the old man was too obsessed. He still wanted to stir up a storm of blood in Chang and then kill the son of Yama in his imagination. The Abbey Dean cared about the world and Haotian Taoism. How could he let him provoke another war between Haotian Taoism and the academy? Ning Ke said calmly, I have thought about these things, but you probably haven't thought about it. Even if Wei Guangming is the most powerful divine priest of light in the West Hill Divine Palace in 100 years, light and darkness are always beyond the human realm. How could he see through the arrangements of Yama? Maybe the truth that Wei Guangming saw was the truth in the mirror. That's why he mistook illusion for reality. I am just an illusion that Yama cast in the human world. I am a fake person in the mirror. Long Qing is not in the mirror. He is the real one. The door of the Taoist temple opened slowly. The burning torches were blown by the air that gushed out of the temple. The light around the stone steps suddenly flickered. Yi Hongyu's blood-red robe of judgment fluttered in the night wind. She walked out with an indifferent expression. Everyone, including the priest in red, bowed to her as they looked at her. Yi Hongyu did not talk to the priests in the Taoist temple, nor did she go to the palace to accept the emperor of the kingdom of Qi's greeting. She got on the sacred sedan and left with 500 divine hall papal knights and dozens of subordinates of the judicial department. The sacred sedan arrived at dusk and left shortly after nightfall. She left the West Hill Divine Palace and came to the capital of the human world. It seemed that she had made a special trip to meet Ning Ke and cure Sang Sang. The subordinates of the judicial department, who had been silent all this while, could no longer suppress the shock in their hearts. They looked at the dark window above the Taoist temple in confusion, thinking that the relationship between the academy and the great divine priest of judgment was unexpectedly close if the great divine priest of judgment could summon them at will. Luo Kadi, who was as burly as a mountain, walked silently behind the sacred sedan. He looked indifferently at the faintly discernible figure behind the veil of the sacred sedan. The fanaticism and greed in his eyes quickly disappeared. You are obsessed with Taoism, so you are called the Tao addict. But are you really the Tao addict in the eyes of your believers? He thought silently that she would use the power of the academy to strengthen her position in the divine hall. How could such a person be ignorant of the world? The autumn wind of the entire continent gradually turned cold. Capital Qing, the capital of the Yen kingdom located in the north, was even colder. Winter had arrived. Withered leaves were blown by the wind on the quiet long street, rolling all over the ground, accompanied by a crisp sound of breaking into powder. Most of the streets in the capital of the Yen kingdom had been cordoned off since morning. Other than the armed troops, no one could be seen on the street. Even so, the soldiers were extremely vigilant. They stood with their backs to the street and stared at all moving objects in front of them, including the fallen leaves. All of this was because of the huge sacred sedan that was moving slowly on the long street. The sacred sedan had just entered the capital from the south gate of the Yen kingdom. It passed by the Yen kingdom's imperial palace but did not enter. Instead, it went to the north gate. The sacred sedan was magnificent and huge, as if it was a moving Taoist temple. It was accompanied by hundreds of papal cavalrymen and dozens of powerhouses from the judicial department. Logically speaking, it should be moving very slowly. In fact, it was moving very slowly. However, the amazing thing was that the sacred sedan was in the capital of the Qi kingdom in the south a few days ago. Now it had appeared in the capital of the Yen kingdom in the north. This itself was almost a miracle. The veil around the sacred sedan was very thin. Even though it was like the willow trees in the winter fog, it could not completely block out the light and cold wind. It was a little cold inside the sacred sedan. Yi Hongyu was still wearing the thin blood-red robe. Her feet were bare as she stepped on the velvet blanket. She did not seem to feel the cold at all. Crown Prince Chongming tightened his robe and tried to make his sitting posture more upright and respectful. He tried his best not to look at the beautiful girl's bare feet. He knew that although the girl was beautiful, her beauty belonged to Haotian after she put on the blood-red robe. She was not someone mortals like him could get close to. Yi Hongyu looked at the weak man sitting a few feet away and said coldly, "You disappoint me." Crown Prince Chongming smiled bitterly and said, "Great divine priest, although I also want to kill my brother, he is my father's son after all. He has many loyal subordinates in the Yen kingdom. Most importantly, he is now a grand cultivator in the knowing destiny state. The Yen kingdom is weak and cannot stop him." Yi Hongyu said expressionlessly, "No matter how weak a country is, a cultivator cannot resist it. I said in the letter that you have to delay him for some time even if you cannot stop him. It is Chong Ming's fault to disappoint you. Crown Prince Chong Ming looked at the northern wilderness outside the city gate. He had a complicated expression on his face and murmured, "This time, no one can stop him." Yi Hongyu looked at the expression on his face and pondered. Prince Long Qing and his fallen knights had successfully broken through several lines of defense of the West Hill Divine Palace. After entering the territory of the Yen Kingdom, they seemed to have melted into the land. They passed through capital Qing and entered the wilderness without a sound. In many people's eyes, the West Hill Divine Palace's pursuit of this traitor could only end here. Even 1,000 years ago, when the great divine priest of light rebelled, Haotian Taoism did not try to enter the wilderness to kill him. That was because the seemingly barren but actually rich land did not belong to the people of the Central Plains. Haotian's divine light had not completely covered that land. However, to everyone's surprise, the great divine priest of judgment did not turn south at capital Qing. Instead, he continued into the wilderness. The chilly autumn wind grew stronger in the wilderness. At one point, it blew up all the layers of gauze around the divine chariot. At this moment, some priests were shocked to find that the graceful figure of the great divine priest of judgment was no longer there. In the wilderness northwest of the frontier fortress of the Yen Kingdom, there was a not-so-steep mountain range. There was a hot spring in the mountain and a small lake as blue as the sea beside the mountain. The lake was shaped like a beauty's waist. The autumn wind blew gently between the cliffs. Yi Hongyu's blood-red divine robe fluttered in the wind, outlining her mesmerizing waistline. It was like the thin blue lake below the cliff that could make countless people drown in it. Looking at the few bonfires by the blue lake in the distance, her expression did not change at all. Just like ascending to the great divine priest of judgment, these were all things that came naturally to her. Since she had promised Ning Ke that she would personally kill that mad dog, she would definitely do it. No matter where she went, whether it was in the Central Plains or the wilderness. Just now, I couldn't open Qidian no matter what. I was so anxious. I'm going to eat now. I'll try to finish the 3rd chapter before 10:30. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Qidian.com to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 543. Today is Feng Ling's birthday. He asked me to join in on his YY activity. After going to the toilet, I was writing while listening to his YY. Suddenly, the world turned dark. My house has been experiencing power outages recently. I was already very depressed. Just when I was about to get angry, I suddenly found that the entire building was without power. At that time, my wife was still walking the dog downstairs. I was suddenly worried that she would be locked in the elevator with the dog like I did last time. I was terrified. Fortunately, the phone got through, so I went to pick her up with a flashlight. Then, I called Feng Ling and asked him to help me say thank you in YY. But I heard that he posted that if I asked for leave today, I would have to wait until 5 p.m. tomorrow. My dear, fortunately, the electricity still came. Anyway, today was quite exciting, but I really hope that there will not be a second time. It was as blue as the sea and shaped like a waist. In fact, it was just a narrow and thin lake in the north. Ning Ke had once stayed here. Mo Shanshan and the girls of the Black Ink Garden had temporarily rested here. Many interesting stories had happened here, and Yi Hongyu had heard of these stories in the hanging basket in the clouds. It was a pity that when she came to the Blue Lake, she did not face the calligraphy addict with wet black hair behind the curtain of the hot spring, nor did she face the food from Chang'an City and the Great River Kingdom. Instead, she faced the bonfires between the piles of stones by the lake and the dozens of people by the bonfires. Long Qing fell into a half-unconscious and half-crazy state of mind when he was attacked by Ning Ke in the Red Lotus Temple. Fortunately, he was taken away by his loyal subordinate. When he woke up, he did not have time to lament or be depressed. He took these subordinates and unwaveringly embarked on the journey to the north. During the 1,000-mile journey, Long Qing relied on the power he had accumulated in the Divine Hall for many years and successfully broke through the heavy defense lines set by the Judicial Department. He also gathered many of his most loyal subordinates and gave them the precious Earth Pill. Thus, the fallen knights, who had suffered heavy casualties, became stronger again. Since the news of Long Qing's death spread 2 years ago, the Yen Emperor was left with only one son. There were no more disputes in the court. The court and military of the Yen Kingdom had long been firmly controlled by Crown Prince Chongming. Therefore, the Divine Hall thought that when Long Qing brought the fallen knights into the Yen Kingdom, he would definitely be dealt a fatal blow by his brother. However, to everyone's surprise, Long Qing and his subordinates easily crossed the entire Yen territory. They did not encounter any strong snipers even when they left the fortress. They finally arrived at the wilderness. Sitting by the fire, Prince Long Qing's face was pale. He picked up a handkerchief to cover his mouth from time to time, but he could not stop coughing. Neither could he stop the white handkerchief from being dyed red by the blood he coughed out. He had been seriously injured in the battle with Ning Ke in the autumn rain at the Red Lotus Temple and had not fully recovered yet. He looked at the blue lake in front of him and the thin ice blocks that were piled up on the surface of the lake by the cold autumn wind. He thought of the time when he entered the wilderness from here 2 years ago and how his life had been changed. He could not help but be silent. At this moment, in the depths of the dark green lake, a few clear white ripples suddenly swept past. The black shadows in front of the ripples were obviously left behind by the fish. However, to cause such a big splash, how big did the fish have to be? Long Qing looked at the blood-stained handkerchief in his hand and suddenly laughed at himself. He put the handkerchief back into his sleeve and slowly stood up. He looked at the girl in the ink-red divine robe on the other side of the lake. The divine robe was very thin, but the red on it was very thick. It was as thick as blood, and when it landed on the beautiful body of the young girl, it was as smooth as red velvet, even giving off a solemn and dignified feeling. Long Qing was very familiar with this blood-red divine robe. In the past few years, he had seen the great divine priest of judgment wearing this blood-red robe on the seat of heavenly black jade countless times. He had also fantasized countless times about how he would feel if he wore this divine robe that seemed to be stained with the blood of hundreds of millions of people. Unfortunately, the new owner of this blood-red divine robe was not him. Long Qing was also very familiar with the new owner of the divine priest of judgment. Many years ago, he had made a name for himself in the Revelation Institute. When he was about to shine brightly, a little girl in a green Taoist robe, with a stubborn, proud and indifferent expression, came before the students of the Revelation Institute under the respectful guidance of the divine priest. From that day on, the two names of Yi Hongyu and Prince Long Qing were often compared. One was the Tao addict, and the other was the divine son of West Hill. They had left the Revelation Institute at the same time and entered the Judicial Department at the same time. However, what made him feel endless shame was that he had never won against her and never walked ahead of her. When he was in the Revelation Institute, his grades were ranked first. That was because she often did not participate in the examinations. When he entered the see-through state, she had already seen the threshold of the knowing destiny state. He was the second priest of the Judicial Department of the Divine Hall, and she was the Grand Master of the Judicial Department. 2 years ago in the wilderness, he was about to enter the knowing destiny state before her, but he met with a tragic accident. It was not until later that he realized with some loneliness and bitterness that she could enter the knowing destiny state at any time. Long Qing was very clear that there would be a battle between him and Yi Hongyu in this life. Otherwise, his Taoist heart could not be truly clear, just like the significance of Ning Ke to his cultivation journey. However, he had never thought that this battle would happen under such circumstances. Yi Hongyu walked towards the surface of the lake. Her bare feet stepped lightly on the surface of the lake as she floated forward. Her blood-red divine robe billowed in the wind from time to time. She looked like a fairy bathed in blood. She was a mixture of charm and holiness. If one were to look closely, they would discover that every time she took a step, a thin piece of ice would float to her feet. Those thin pieces of ice seemed to be able to sense her thoughts, or perhaps it could be said that she had a complete grasp of the rules of the movement of everything on this autumn lake. This was even more incredible than walking on the lake. Priest! Divine throne! The fallen knights in black armor stood up in shock when they saw the blood-robed girl on the lake. Their horses neighed in fear, and many of them were so terrified that they forgot to prepare for battle. Long Qing watched silently as Yi Hongyu stepped on the lake ice and approached him. He thought for a moment and then took a deep breath. His psyche power surged out and he summoned his peach blossom without hesitation. In the face of such a terrifying opponent, he knew that any fighting methods, skills, or willpower would be meaningless. He could only use his strongest ability to fight with his opponent. The black peach blossom had 5 petals. One of them had been shot by Ning Kei's primordial 13 arrows, and the other 2 petals had been crushed into powder in front of the ruined temple. It looked a little strange now. There was a sense of disgusting ugliness in its misery, like a rotten fish that had been dead for half a year on a ship. The fallen knights felt the deadly darkness in Prince Long Qing's peach blossom. They were suddenly refreshed and got rid of their natural fear of Yi Hongyu. Dozens of Taoist swords came out of their scabbards with a shrill buzzing sound. They attacked the girl on the lake. The moment Prince Long Qing summoned the black peach blossom, Yi Hongyu's expression changed slightly. That was because she sensed the deadly aura. She thought of the tragedy in the Jishou Abbey and understood what was going on. As for the dozens of seemingly powerful Taoist swords, they were not in her eyes at all. She did not even pay any attention to them. She spread her robe slightly and the holy Haotian divine light spread across the lake. With the help of the earth pill, most of the fallen knights had reached the see-through realm, especially the few cavalry commanders who were lucky enough to survive. Their natal Taoist swords followed the aura of Prince Long Qing and were painted with the darkness of the underworld that they had obtained after sacrificing themselves to Yama. Their power was amazing and could directly break through the front of the armored cavalry. Ordinary cultivators would not be able to resist it. The West Hill divine skill was the nemesis of the Nether Taoist swords. When the seemingly unstoppable black Taoist swords flew to the surface of the lake and into the Haotian divine light around Yi Hongyu, they were like ghosts encountering the scorching sun. The swords trembled violently and emitted green smoke. They let out pitiful wails and lost all their previous power. Some of the black Taoist swords sensed that something was wrong and tried to fly out of the range of the Haotian divine light. However, the green smoke emitted from the swords was like countless invisible ropes that tightly bound them. No matter how hard they tried, they could not fly out of the holy light. They looked like moths trapped in a lampshade. The blood-red robe draped over her jade-like arms like a waterfall. Yi Hongyu calmly stepped on the lake water and slowly and unstoppably walked to the other side of the blue lake. The Haotian divine light emitted from her body was like a huge light shield. It moved along with her on the surface of the lake. The black Taoist swords also moved along with her. The scene was very strange and shocking. Her bare, jade-like feet stepped onto the shore of the lake, leaving a shallow footprint on the ice-cold sandy ground. The holy Haotian divine light gradually disappeared into Yi Hongyu's body. The dozens of black ghostly Taoist swords flew away as if they had been pardoned. Yi Hongyu casually raised her right hand into the air and grabbed one of the ghostly Taoist swords. The moment she grabbed the ghostly Taoist sword, the black sword emitted green smoke as if it had caught fire. Accompanied by the green smoke, the Taoist sword gradually returned to its bright white color. Some of the remaining dozens of ghostly Taoist swords successfully flew back to the side of the fallen knight. Most of them fell miserably into the cold lake water, splashing up countless waves and scaring countless fish in the lake. Yi Hongyu casually snatched the sword and drew it out. Seemed to be very casual. She stabbed the black peach blossom of life with her sword. Because it was casual, she did not know where the sword style was pointing. How could she dodge it? Long Qing could not dodge the sword style that was a combination of Ku Haoren's sword style and Liu Bai's sword style. He did not even think about dodging it. His face was pale, but he resolutely faced it. The tip of the sword touched the black peach blossom lightly. There was a soft chi sound. The black peach blossom, formed from the pure chi of heaven and earth, shook violently and showed signs of cracking in an instant. There was no despair in Long Qing's eyes. There was only determination and coldness. In the next moment, the black and white in his eyes fused together again and turned into a gloomy gray. An extremely greedy and violent aura shot out from the black Taoist robe on his body. It immediately caused the autumn lake to ripple. Looking at his strange eyes, Yi Hongyu frowned slightly. Her expression was solemn and disgusted. In the end, it was all disdain and mockery. She flicked her divine robe lightly. The holy divine light mixed with the strong smell of blood struck the vortex formed by the greedy aura in front of her. Holiness and blood, these two auras could not be mixed. At this moment, when they were waved out from the sleeves of her divine robe, they seemed to become the stones in the prison of the divine hall that had been soaked in blood for thousands of years. Those stones with the smell of blood were protecting the light of Haotian. Such stones could not be swallowed by any vortex. Victory on the first day. See you all tomorrow. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Qidian.com to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 544. Long Qing's face turned cold as he watched Yi Hongyu brush her divine robe. His eyes turned even darker until they lost all signs of life. The greedy and cold aura of nirvanic extermination in the gravel by the lake grew thicker. However, in this cold world, there was always a ray of light that could not be erased. It was a ray of light with a strong smell of blood. It came from the blood-red divine robe. The sleeves of the divine robe danced by the lake. Every time the horn of the robe moved, a gust of wind with a strong smell of blood and holiness would attack the vortex formed by the aura of nirvanic extermination. The strong wind was really like the moss-covered stones in the prison of the West Hill Divine Palace. It continuously entered the whirlpool, like lake water falling from the sky into the ground. It shook the surrounding chi of heaven and earth, causing it to tremble and escape in all directions. Countless violent roars sounded in the quiet lake. Affected by Long Qing's gray eyes and Yi Hongyu's mighty attack, the lake water seemed to be boiling. The fish that were hiding in the depths of the lake either fainted or died. They gradually floated up and piled up on the surface of the water in a pile of pale white. The forest further away did not escape the terrifying impact of the countless collisions of auras. The 1,000-year-old branches that stretched out to the surface of the lake broke, and the trees shook uneasily. The withered yellow leaves that were left floated weakly into the air. No one knew if they would fall into the lake or be crushed into pieces by the wind. A few cold-resistant magpies curled up their tail feathers in fear. They desperately flapped their wings and flew far away. However, in order to survive the difficult winter in the wilderness, they had already eaten too much and became too fat. They could not increase their speed at all. Therefore, they could not escape the aftermath of the battle between the two powerhouses. They fell to the ground and died. There were countless tiny wounds on Yi Hongyu's body. Countless thin streams of blood flowed out from those wounds and seeped through the light divine robe before slowly dripping to the ground. Soaked in blood, the divine robe appeared even redder. It was like a red flower that had been washed by dew. It was breathtakingly beautiful. The wet divine robe stuck to her body. It was breathtakingly beautiful and extremely alluring. Her face was a little pale, but it was still beautiful and moving. After such a great battle, there was not a speck of dust or blood on her delicate skin. Her eyes, in particular, were abnormally bright, yet they seemed so calm. It formed a clear contrast with her divine robe that was dripping with blood and her alluring body. She was covered in blood, but she was still calm and beautiful. This meant that she was absolutely powerful. On the gravel ground by the lake, dozens of fallen knights were seriously injured. Their blood dyed the stones beneath them red. Long Qing knelt on one knee. His sweaty hair stuck miserably to his forehead. The silver mask on his face was lost somewhere, revealing his badly burned cheek. Yi Hongyu walked forward slowly. With every step she took, more blood flowed out of her body. However, her expression did not change. It was as if she could not feel the pain. It was as if there was an endless amount of blood in her body that could be shed. She walked towards Long Qing and said, "You are indeed much stronger than before. I am very surprised that you did not manage to kill Ning Ke in front of the Red Lotus Temple. However, it is a pity that you are still not as strong as me." Long Qing raised his head with difficulty. He looked at the blood-red robe that was getting closer and closer. He looked at his somewhat tragic face and revealed a strange smile. For some reason, he did not tell Yi Hongyu about the strange things that had happened to Ning Ke during the battle in the autumn rain at the Red Lotus Temple. "I have no interest in the seat of heavenly black jade now. In fact, you really do not need to pay such a high price to abandon your subordinates and take the risk to kill me alone," he said as he panted, still wearing a strange smile on his face. Yi Hongyu walked to a few feet away from him and said, "People like me will not believe that you are so depressed that you want to wander the wilderness in search of freedom and true inner peace. I know that you are not interested in those things. Therefore, there is no reason for me to let you continue to grow stronger to the point that you can threaten me." Long Qing held his knees and said tiredly, "People like you never say anything before killing. Therefore, I am very curious. Why did you give me the chance to say my last words? I heard that you told Ning Ke that you think you are the son of Yama?" Yi Hongyu said, "Of course, the main reason why I did not kill you now is that I also need to rest. I do not want to die with a piece of trash like you." Long Qing looked at her and said mockingly, "The Tao addict actually needs to rest now? Is it because your spirit has been worn down by the seat of heavenly black jade after you became the great divine priest of judgment?" Yi Hongyu did not get angry because of his mockery. She said calmly, "It is said that below Haotian, above the divine throne, even if you are a demigod, you are still not a true god. Humans need to rest. Humans need to rest. Yes. Many people have always wanted to be a god, but they do not know that being a human is also a very happy thing, as long as you do not become a ghost." Long Qing said desolately, "I do not know whether I am the son of Yama or a person of the heavens mandate, but I probably cannot be considered a human anymore." The blood-red divine robe gradually dried. Yi Hongyu looked at him and said calmly, "No matter whether you are a human or a god, you will become a ghost today. If you are really the son of Yama, then I will send you to see your father." As soon as she finished speaking, she took another step forward. Suddenly, in the forest by the blue lake, there was a sudden dense sound of footsteps. There were also a few extremely strong spiritual powers that instantly covered the gravel ground. Looking at more than 1,000 grassland barbarians wearing fur coats and holding all kinds of weapons rushing out of the forest, Yi Hongyu's eyes suddenly became bright and sharp. The people of the grassland tribes who would appear in the frontier fortress of the north of Yen Kingdom could only belong to the left king's palace, which was now in a precarious situation. Then the several strong spiritual powers that covered the gravel ground must have come from the high priests of the palace. "So you have an agreement with these barbarians. But they are not having a good time now. How could they still send several high priests to pick you up? What did you pay for it?" Yi Hongyu asked. Long Qing stood up. Blood and pus kept flowing from the center of his black Taoist robe. The hole in his body must have been seriously injured in the previous battle. The left king's palace is indeed living a miserable life now. They are attacked by the desolate man and the people of the Central Plains. Just like me now, I am attacked by the divine Hall of Light and Ning Ke in the dark. You asked me what I have to pay to win the trust of these grassland people. In fact, I have not paid anything. He looked at Yi Hongyu and said, The Yen people and the Left King's Palace have been neighbors for many years. We have been enemies for many years and friends for many years. Coincidentally, I have been a friend of their new Chanyu since many years ago. More importantly, we are in the same situation now and have the same goal. Yi Hongyu asked, What goal? Long Qing said, To become strong again and then to take revenge. Yi Hongyu was silent. Long Qing said, Actually, I did not expect that you would catch up with me here. But fortunately, as you said, no matter how strong you are only a human, not a real god. So you need to rest, which gave me a chance to turn things around. At the same time, I am also very grateful to myself for being able to stand in front of you until now. Yi Hongyu suddenly smiled slightly. Her beautiful face was slightly pale, but this smile instantly brightened her beauty. Long Qing was not in the mood to appreciate her beauty, even though he was sometimes amazed by her beauty in the West Hill Divine Palace over the years, because he could see the mockery and disdain in her smile. It's true that I'm not a god. I'm just a human being, so sometimes I still have some human curiosity. For example, whether you're the son of Yama or what your intentions are in heading north to the wilderness. So I've been waiting to see who would appear to help you. Yi Hongyu looked at him and said calmly, Ning Ke once said something very strange by the Yinming Lake. Curiosity kills the cat. I don't understand it, but I know that curiosity can easily delay things. However, it is a pity that the level you have reached is not enough to delay me from killing you. Long Qing had an incredulous expression on his face. He said coldly, Now I have 1,000 grassland warriors and 7 high priests here. How can you kill me? Yi Hongyu looked at him as if she was looking at an idiot and said, You are just 30 feet in front of me. Even if the Chanyu of the Golden Tribe leads his wolf cavalry here, how can they stop me from killing you, let alone the Left King's Palace? Long Qing said in shock, But after you kill me, how can you escape? Yi Hongyu said, My goal in coming to the West Hill is to kill you, not to escape. As long as I can kill you, does it matter whether I can escape or not? Such a simple sentence required a strong logic and a fearless will to be able to say it so calmly. Hearing this, Long Qing's expression suddenly froze. Yi Hongyu finally said, Most importantly, if you become a meaningless corpse, what reason will the Left King's Palace have to keep me alive? Will these barbarians be so loyal that they will not hesitate to destroy their entire race to kill me, the great divine priest of West Hill? Long Qing, you are really stupid. Long Qing's face became abnormally pale because he knew that Yi Hongyu was right. If he died now, why would the Left King's Palace avenge him and fight against the great divine priest of judgment? He held on to the last hope and said, But they will not watch you kill me, because I am their last hope to survive and even grow in the wilderness. As if to prove Long Qing's judgment, the branches of the forest by the lake suddenly became chaotic. Several powerful auras that had already landed on the gravel ground instantly became more violent and attacked Yi Hongyu's body. Those auras contained the wild power of nature, and even faintly had the smell of some wild beasts in the wilderness. That was the unique spiritual attack of the grassland barbarian priests. Yi Hongyu's face was slightly pale. She looked at the forest coldly. A proud and domineering snort came from her thin lips. Almost at the same time, a painful muffled sound came from the distant forest. In the dark forest, a priest of the Left King's Palace, who was wearing an expensive fur coat and several kinds of bone celestial devices, sat down on the ground with a terrified expression. A very thin bone instrument on his body broke instantly, and 2 streams of black blood flowed from his nostrils. He was seriously injured. Yi Hongyu looked at the forest and felt the several spiritual auras. She disdainfully said, How dare you hurt me with the spiritual power? You are really brave and stupid. Before they met, a priest of the left king's palace had his sense of perception broken and his internal organs bleeding. The grassland priests in the forest looked at each other and saw the shock and fear in each other's eyes. The most shocking thing about Tao addict Yi Hongyu was that she was proficient in all kinds of arts. When she met a sword master, she was a more powerful sword master. When she met an array master, she was a better array master. When she met a psyche master, she was the most terrifying psyche master. Now that she had become the great divine priest of judgment, why would she be afraid of the spiritual power of these grassland priests? Yi Hongyu looked at Longqing. The nether Taoist sword that she had snatched earlier had been thrown away. Now it was her Taoist sword that had been quietly hidden in the blood-red robe. It was her natal Taoist sword. The sword seemed to have no edge. It swam out of the robe and was as agile as a fish. However, it left a straight white line in the air. Longqing looked desperate and smiled bitterly. However, at this moment there was a loud bang. A bolt of lightning fell from the sky and hit the Taoist sword in the air without any deviation. After a while, the dull roar of thunder sounded in the sky. The sound lasted for an eternity. There was little rain in the cold autumn in the wilderness, and there was no rain today. However, there was thunder. Countless sky thunders struck the lake and the forest. It was deafening, the lake water was shaking, and the gravel ground by the lake was full of smoke and dust. After a long time, the thunder finally stopped. At this time, the sky became much gloomier. The smoke and dust in the sky seemed to float up and form thick black clouds, shrouding the lake and the mountain. Yi Hongyu took back her Taoist sword and looked up at the sky. Behind the black clouds, there was a faint flash of lightning. The will of heaven was unpredictable. The power of heaven was unpredictable. She looked at the sky in silence. No one knew what she was thinking. Longqing was sent flying further away. He leaned against a rock. His burnt face was full of excitement and fanaticism. He coughed up blood and laughed loudly. He looked at Yi Hongyu, his face twisted. He shouted crazily, "I said that I am not a human. Naturally, I have the will of heaven. I am a person of the heavenly mandate. Look, Haotian did not abandon me. Yi Hongyu, as long as heaven does not kill me, what can you do to me?" Yi Hongyu did not care about Longqing's crazy shouting. She looked up at the sky attentively, as if there was a beautiful scenery behind the clouds. She saw the scenery. Her expression was a little confused, and then it gradually returned to indifference. Then she saw a person on a cliff far away. The cliff was very high, so the person was also standing very high. He was so high that he could reach the clouds in the sky. The person had a Taoist bun and wore a light-colored Taoist robe. He carried a wooden sword. From the moment she saw the person on the cliff, Yi Hongyu stopped looking at the sky. She only had eyes for him. However, no matter how she looked, the person remained silent and did not move. Yi Hongyu's expression became more and more indifferent. There seemed to be a thin layer of frost on her eyebrows. Then she was unable to suppress her anger. This was the first time in her life that she was angry at the man with the wooden sword. She suddenly turned around and looked at Longqing again. Her killing intent rose again. It was as if she had sensed something. The man on the cliff in the distance made a sound. The thick black clouds that seemed to be flowing slowly but were actually turbulent suddenly squeezed out more than 10 balls of light. They turned into more than 10 bolts of lightning and fell towards the blue lake again. The lightning came again. The boiling stones in the lake cracked uneasily. The aura of heaven and earth was torn into countless pieces. It turned into a terrible hurricane and violently passed through the gravel by the lake. Lightning flashed and thunder roared. The blood-red divine robe of judgment danced in the wind. The figure did not fall. More than 1,000 grassland barbarians rushed out of the dense forest, but before they had time to approach the lake, they were shaken by the thunderbolts falling from the sky. The instinctive reverence for the sky made them kneel on the ground, constantly praying that God would forgive their sins. The 7 priests of the left king's palace in the dense forest were much calmer than the ordinary people. However, it was precisely because they could sense the majesty and power contained in the thunderbolts that they were actually more shocked than the ordinary people. When they saw the blood-red divine robe dancing in the wind and the figure stubbornly refusing to obey the lightning, the shock in their hearts finally reached its peak. He was indeed the legendary great divine priest of West Hill. He had such a terrible willpower and dared to fight with God. The wind and thunder gradually subsided. Yi Hongyu stood by the lake full of holes. Her figure looked a little lonely. She did not look at Long Qing anymore. Nor did she look at the figure on the cliff in the distance. She did not look at the scenery in the clouds. She did not look at the scenery of the lake and mountains. She did not look at anything. He just looked at himself, looked at his own shadow, and looked at it silently for a long time. She gave a loud shout. This shout was very clear and angry. In the quiet lake and mountains, it spread far and wide. This shout was full of unwillingness. A stream of blood slowly flowed from the corner of her mouth. In the forest, several priests of the left king's palace from the grassland were shocked by the terrible spiritual impact contained in this shout. They spat out blood and directly fell down, unconscious. Yi Su, who was standing on the cliff in the distance, heard this angry shout. He knew that her anger was directed at him. This was the first time in his life that his sister showed anger to him. She even faintly wanted to challenge him. Yi Su was not unhappy. He was very happy. He was so happy that he wanted to dance and shout to his heart's content. Because he knew that after seeing the real lightning today, she would no longer be the sister who looked at his back and wanted to get close to him. But she was always stubborn or self-abased and did not dare to open her mouth. From today on, she was Yi Hongyu. However, he still could not let her kill Long Qing. Because the Abbey Dean did not want the apostate to die. Yi Su looked up at the sky and the thick clouds that seemed to be within reach. He looked at the slowly accumulating bright lightning behind the clouds. He guessed that Haotian seemed to think the same way. Using the sword to attract lightning was the legendary state of sword Taoism. Yi Su realized something in the small Taoist temple in Chang'an. It seemed that he had made a big step forward on the road of cultivation. If it was in the past, Yi Hongyu would only be happy for her brother. However, today she felt very complicated. She was unwilling and angry. The most important question was, where did the clouds come from? After sitting on the seat of heavenly black jade and becoming the great divine priest of judgment, her heaven-man connection gradually deepened. When her gaze passed through the seemingly terrifying black clouds of thunder and saw the real scenery in the sky, she could faintly feel the will of Haotian. However, almost at the same time, she did not know whether it was because of unwillingness or anger, but she suddenly had the urge to fight. As the great divine priest of judgment, even if she occasionally had such a thought, it would be a great disrespect and the most serious sin. Yi Hongyu felt a slight uneasiness in her Taoist heart. She suddenly shivered and very valiantly escaped from that dangerous state of mind. She slowly lowered her head, and her black hair fluttered in the breeze. The lightning gradually subsided, and the clouds gradually dispersed. Not long after, they disappeared without a trace, and the clear autumn sky was revealed. Yi Hongyu did not think about the blasphemous thought that flashed through her mind. But how could she really erase the thought when it was born? Even if it was just a flash, it would definitely leave a mark in her mind. The clouds and thunder dispersed. She still lowered her head. In the deepest part of her heart, somewhere that she could not see, there seemed to be a voice indifferently saying, "This seems to be possible." After an unknown period of time, Yi Hongyu raised her head. "You are not allowed to return to the Central Plains without my permission." She looked at Long Qing and said calmly, "Otherwise, even if heaven can tolerate you, I will not let you live." Her blood-red clothes fluttered. She turned and left the blue lake. After Yi Hongyu left the capital of the kingdom of Qi, Ning Ke did not immediately leave with Sang Sang. First, He needed to repair the horse carriage that his master had left for him. Otherwise, although the journey was not long, they would not be able to continue. He now knew that the old red-robed priest from the Divine Hall of Light was called Chen Siyuan. He had already confirmed that the priest's loyalty to Sang Sang was far greater than his love for the academy. Therefore, he would certainly not miss the opportunity to use him to find the materials needed to repair the horse carriage and other things. With the help of such a noble person, Ning Ke also enjoyed the same treatment in the kingdom of Qi as he did in the Tang Empire. He could use almost all the rare materials in the West Hill vassal state. Usually, this white Taoist temple was extremely quiet, but now it was occupied by all kinds of terrifying sounds. Iron hammers constantly pounded on the walls of the steel carriage, producing thunderous sounds. Sharp and hard tools repeatedly engraved talisman lines, and disgusting sounds similar to human abdominal rehearsals when rare metals were melted and poured. These sounds alternated and seemed to never stop. No matter how devoted the priest was, he could not read the scriptures. No matter how diligent the papal cavalryman was, he was not in the mood to practice martial arts. Even the wrinkles on Chen Siyuan's face were increasing rapidly. Fortunately, although Ning Ke was not as talented as the sixth brother in this aspect, he was still very amazing. It did not take long for the black horse carriage to be repaired to its original state. If one did not pay attention to the ugly scars on the walls of the carriage. When they left the capital of the kingdom of Qi, the red-robed priest Chen Siyuan sent a team of cavalrymen to escort them. Believing that there would be no problem, Ning Ke finally had the mood to enjoy the scenery outside the window. What really made him feel better was that someone was watching the scenery with him by the window. With Yi Hongyu's help, Sang Sang's condition was finally under control. She was no longer in a coma. Although she was still a little weak, she could at least enjoy the scenery or look at Ning Ke's face. These 6,000 words almost killed me. Fortunately, they are good. That's all for today. Although I will write more, I really don't know when I can finish them. It's even more likely that I won't be able to finish them tonight. That's why I have to say that there is no more for today. Everyone, please go to bed after reading. I said 10,000 per day, not 10,000 per day. Of course, I have to write more in the beginning. Otherwise, if I accumulate too much debt, I will really die. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Qi.com to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 545. Sang Sang's condition was temporarily stabilized, and Ning Ke was most grateful to Yi Hongyu. He knew that the young divine priest of judgment should be on the way to kill Long Qing. Logically speaking, even if they were not friends, he should have expressed a certain degree of worry out of gratitude. But he did not. Ning Ke had absolute confidence in Yi Hongyu. The current Prince Long Qing was indeed very terrifying. In the Battle of Autumn Rain, if he had not been lucky, he would have died long ago. However, he still believed that Yi Hongyu was the most terrifying person among the younger generation of cultivators. Since she had said that she would kill Long Qing herself, then Long Qing would not be able to escape death. Looking at the autumn scenery outside the window, he recalled the bloody battle in the autumn rain, the ghostly figure of the fallen knight in front of the ruined temple, and Long Qing, who was wearing a black Taoist robe, suddenly overlapped with some scenes in his memory. After a while, he remembered that in his dreams, he had seen 3 black whirlwinds in the wilderness. The 3 black whirlwinds were cold and dark, as if they were a part of the night. Now that he thought about it carefully, it was really similar to the feeling that Long Qing and the fallen knight revealed. Ning Ke increasingly felt that what Long Qing had said that day might be true. The guy who learned to eat and loved to eat people was the son of Yama. Thinking of this, he suddenly felt that his state of mind was calmer. The faint fear of rumors about his origin and the Buddhism sect had naturally lessened. He was a little anxious about reaching the Lank Temple. No matter how anxious he was, the journey still needed to move a mile at a time. Especially since Song Song's body was weak, she could not bear to travel for a long time without rest, so the horse carriage did not speed up. The weather in the south was relatively warm and humid. It was late autumn, but the feeling of autumn was thick but not severe. There were many green trees on both sides of the road, which was much more pleasing to the eye compared to the desolate scenery in the north. Occasionally there would be an autumn rain, but it was getting colder day by day. Song Song's body became colder, especially her hands and feet, which felt as if they were made of ice. The warming effect of the liquor was getting shorter and shorter. Therefore, Ning Ke pasted the remaining failed fu paper with the warming effect on Sang Sang. He also made a brazier in the carriage. The fire fu, which was extremely precious in the eyes of cultivators, kept burning in the brazier day and night. No one knew how many fu papers were burned during the short journey. Ning Ke's psyche power could not withstand such extravagance and exaggeration, no matter how powerful it was. His face became more and more haggard. Sang Sang did not dissuade him, because she knew it was meaningless and ineffective. If Ning Ke was sick, she would do the same thing, and Ning Ke would not dissuade her. She looked at the autumn scenery outside the window every day, or at Ning Ke's face by the window, with a calm smile on her face. For her, as long as the scenery was beautiful, even if the autumn wind and rain fell and the yellow leaves withered, as long as it was Ning Ke's face, even if it was haggard as if he had not slept for many days. Sang Sang looked at the scenery longer and longer, and the smile on her face became sweeter and sweeter. However, she spoke less and less. In the past few years, she did not speak much, but now she became more and more silent. She did not know if the elder of Lank Temple could cure her strange illness. She did not know if there was a future for her, and if there was, what kind of future it would be. The fear of not knowing was the reason for her silence. Ning Ke understood her feelings, but he did not say anything because he knew Song Song's temperament. Sang Sang, who seemed gentle but was actually stubborn, never liked to be comforted. That was because she and Ning Ke had risked their lives to survive all these years, so she knew that no matter what happened, she could not be weak. The weaker she was, the easier it would be for her to die. If she was moved by being comforted, that would be the beginning of her weakness. Ning Ke did not comfort her, but hugged her more tightly in his arms. He looked at the autumn scenery outside the window and stared blankly for a long time. In fact, this was good. They both felt as if they had returned to 10 years ago. Other than holding Sang Sang in his arms and staring blankly at the scenery, Ning Ke had been doing something else the rest of the time, especially when Sang Sang was asleep. That was to repair the primordial 13 arrows. There were special tools for repairing arrows in the arrow box. His hands were very steady, and the talisman carved on the iron arrow shaft was originally his, so the repair of the iron arrows went smoothly. Just as he was repairing the last iron arrow, there was a hubbub of voices coming from outside the carriage. Sang Sang lifted the curtains and looked forward. She saw several strangely shaped mountains among the hills in the south. The tops of the mountains were flat and looked like the black tiles on the eaves. They had arrived at Hua Mountain. In the world of Haotian, the Buddhism sect had been silent for thousands of years. They cultivated behind closed doors. Occasionally, they entered the human realm, but they were willing to be vassals of Haotian Taoism. Most of them were famous for their thinking and meditation. In the relationship between worshipping Buddha and worshipping heaven, many eminent monks directly believed that the fate wheel was just another way of expressing the will of Haotian. This statement made the Buddhism sect live in a low-key manner under the system of Haotian Taoism. It was so low-key that many predecessors wrote in their notes that the Buddhism sect was more of a way of thinking than anything else. Perhaps it was because of these various reasons that the Buddhism sect was not very prosperous in the world. Other than the sadhus in the countryside, it was extremely difficult to find a Buddhist temple in countries like the South Jin Kingdom. The only exception was the Yueluan Kingdom. That was because it was very close to the Xiankong Temple in the unknown place of the Buddhism sect in the depths of the wilderness. The Yueluan kingdom was deeply influenced by the Buddhism sect, and cultivating Buddhism was extremely popular there. There were even descriptions of the 72 temples in the Misty Rain. However, the 72 temples in the Misty Rain could never surpass an ancient temple in the famous southeast. Whether it was the importance to the Buddhism sect or the position in the hearts of the believers, this ancient temple far surpassed the temples in the Yueluan kingdom. This ancient temple was the Lank Temple. The Lank Temple was in the Tile Mountain. The Lank Temple had a very long history. According to the ancient records, not long after the West Hill Divine Palace was built, there were trees falling in the depths of the Tile Mountain. Pavilions were built, and pagodas and halls were gradually built. In the rumors of the cultivation world, the Lank Temple was the mountain gate left by the unknown place Xiankong Temple. It was similar to the relationship between the West Hill Divine Palace and the Jishou Abbey. Therefore, it was extremely respected and no one dared to violate the mountain gate. History and legends created the unique status of the Lank Temple. For countless years, no one knew how many tragic, solemn, or legendary stories were staged in this ancient temple. It was also because of this ancient temple that the Yulan Hungry Ghost Festival gradually became the most important festival in the world. The most popular debate in decades also began here. It was not yet the day of the Yulan Hungry Ghost Festival, and the Tang Empire's diplomatic corps had not arrived yet. However, the Tile Mountain was already very lively. On the second floor of the houses on both sides of the Bluestone Street, all kinds of flags and banners were hung. The colors of the banners were very simple, mostly black and white. No one knew if they were a metaphor for the most popular game of chess around the Tile Mountain, or the real reason for the Yulan Hungry Ghost Festival, which was to expiate the souls of the underworld. It was believed that the ordinary monks in the Lank Temple and the residents who had lived in the town for dozens of generations did not know the origin of this custom. For the people living in the present world, the Yulan Hungry Ghost Festival was just a simple and pure grand festival. All they needed to do was enjoy the festive atmosphere. There were already many tourists in the town at the foot of the Tile Mountain. No one knew where these tourists came from, but they all had the same happy smile on their faces. The adults greeted each other with a smile and enjoyed the scenery in the legendary 1,000-year-old houses. The children ran and chased each other on the street. A girl panted as she chased after her brother, her little face full of grievance. Suddenly, she saw hundreds of red fish in the stone pond by the side of the road. She immediately squatted down and stared at the calm swimming fish with her eyes wide open. She had long forgotten that she wanted to find her brother and cry. The middle-aged man standing by the stone pond looked at the girl and smiled. He handed her a thin wooden stick with a thin net the size of a teacup tied to the end of the stick. The girl looked at the people behind her who were fishing for money and shook her head shyly. She knew that fishing for fish required money, but her mother had said that she was too young to bring money with her. She could only leave it with her brother, but her brother had taken the money to buy sugar figurines. She did not know where he was now. The girl suddenly remembered that she was chasing after her brother. She screamed and stood up. Just as she was a little afraid, her brother, who was about 7 or 8 years old, squeezed out of the crowd and looked at her with a proud smile. Then, he took out 2 copper coins from his waist and stuffed them into her little hand. The red fish in the stone pond were no longer as peaceful. The water splashed and the moss on the side of the pond began to peel off. From time to time, the sigh of disappointment and the shouts of surprise from the brother and sister could be heard on the street. The black horse carriage stopped outside the town and did not enter. The cavalry of the Kingdom of Qi's National Palace had been driven away by Ning Quebec. Through the curtain, he and Sang Sang looked at the peaceful and happy town and the brother and sister who were squatting by the pond fishing for fish. They probably remembered the scene when they went to the market in the walled city when they were young and laughed. The Tile Mountain was not a single mountain, but several mountains connected. These mountains were still emitting a faint green color in the late autumn. They were very similar in shape, and their peaks were flat as if they were cut by a knife. From afar, they looked like several black tiles that had been casually put together by a naughty child. While the town was very lively, the depths of the tile mountain were still so quiet. The corner of the ancient temple loomed in the forest, as if it was influenced by Buddhism. The last chirping of the southern autumn cicadas did not sound sad and desperate, but indifferent. This was the back of the mountain. If they wanted to go to the Lank Temple, they would never be able to reach the main hall from this mountain path. But the black horse carriage was slowly moving up the mountain path. Ning Ke did not bring Sang Sang to the tile mountain to go to the Lank Temple. He wanted to go to the back of the mountain to find someone. In the secluded mountain behind the Lank Temple, there lived several generations of Buddhist Vedanta who had lived in seclusion. Ning Ke was looking for one of them. It was the elder of the Lank Temple whom he had heard of countless times. Try to finish the next chapter before 10:30. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidien.com to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 546. There were many elders in the Lank Temple. Some were in charge of discipline, and some were in charge of the Zen Temple. When Long Qing had shown his brilliance in the debate, he had been appreciated by one of the elders. However, there was only one real elder in this ancient temple. Or rather, there was only one elder who could let the listener know who he was talking about without any prefixes. Elder Qishan was the most senior person in the Xiankong Temple, and even in the entire cultivation world. He was older than Kunimati, and was even older than the West Hill Hierarch. Other than the Special Academy, most people in the world had to greet him as a disciple. No one knew how old this Vedanta of the Buddhism sect was. Some people inferred that he was over 100 years old from the famous conversation between him and the West Hill Divine Palace Hierarch. Interestingly, the topic of the famous conversation was that Elder Qishan and the Hierarch Lord guessed the headmaster's age. It was rumored in the cultivation world that Elder Qishan was the illegitimate son of the former chief, preaching monk of the Xiankong Temple. Of course, no one dared to ask him for confirmation, or even mention it, so the rumors were always rumors. However, the reason why Elder Qishan was respected by the entire cultivation world was not only because of his seniority or his respectable background, but also because of his noble character. Decades ago, the south of the mainland encountered a terrible flood. The river roared and overflowed, and the turbid waves submerged countless fertile fields. The dikes of various countries broke one after another, and the water flowed into the Great Lake. The situation was extremely dangerous. Master Qishan, who was still the abbot of the Lank Temple, led the monks out of the Hua Mountain with dozens of carriages of food and medicine that had been accumulated over the years. He gave out porridge and medicine along the way and saved countless victims. Master Qishan became ill from overworking and was infected with corpse poison when he was dealing with the victims' bodies. He almost died of a serious illness. The Great Lake, which contained countless rivers, was gradually unable to hold on, especially the dike in Kongzhou of the South Jin Kingdom. It was on the verge of collapse one night. Master Qishan was in Kongzhou at that time. Seeing the situation, he did not care about his serious illness. He took off his monk's robe and jumped into the lake. With unimaginable cultivation, state, and willpower, he stood in front of the collapsing dike for an entire night. The next morning, the Sword Garret of South Jin Kingdom and the West Hill Divine Palace's Divine Talisman Masters arrived in Kongzhou. The situation eased, and Master Qishan finally walked out of the turbid waves. He fell unconscious as soon as he landed. The most important thing during that year's flood was that night, the long night when Master Qishan replaced the dike with his own body. Kongzhou and the South Jin Kingdom's most important farmland behind the Long Dike were fortunately saved. This meant that the entire South Jin Kingdom and even half of the mainland were saved. After that night, Master Qishan's name shook the world. Whether it was the willpower he had displayed or the powerful state of his cultivation, everyone was in awe of him. However, he had also paid a heavy price for this. The amazing power that he had cultivated for decades in the Lank Temple had been used up. He had been severely injured. Even if he were to cultivate again after he recovered, he would never be able to return to his peak state. In the legends of the cultivation world, Master Qishan should have been recognized as the most promising grand cultivator to break through the 5 states before the Sage of Sword, Liu Bai. He might even be able to transcend the mortal world and become a saint. Unfortunately, since then, he had no choice but to stay outside the threshold forever, unable to touch the realm above the mortal world. The cultivation world and the billions of people in the world remembered Master Qishan's great kindness. Their respect for him did not decrease, but became more sincere. Even decades later, it was still the same. When Master Lian Sheng of the Kingdom of Song lost his wife, he wrote a morning essay on a rainy night and began to travel around the world. He came to the Tile Mountain and stayed at the Lank Temple. When he was sleeping in the back hall, he heard an old monk talking about Buddhism and understood Buddhism. That old monk was Master Qishan. A few years later, Lian Sheng returned from the western wilderness. He was enlightened by the Xiankong Temple and refused the invitation of the West Hill Divine Palace. He stroked his hair in front of an old monk and officially entered Buddhism. That old monk was also Master Qishan. After that, Lian Sheng lived in seclusion in the back mountain of the Lank Temple for 2 years. At that time, his cultivation state had far surpassed that of Master Qishan. However, he respected Master Qishan very much. During the Yulan Hungry Ghost Festival, the Devil's Doctrine massacred the Lank Temple and killed all the cultivators of the right path. However, they did not hurt the monks in the temple. Now that he thought about it, it must be because of Master Qishan. Ning Ke did not bring Sang Sang to the Lank Temple to attend the Yulan Hungry Ghost Festival. He was not here to discuss the desolate man's invasion of the south on behalf of the Tang Empire. It had nothing to do with the legend of the underworld invasion. He was here to cure his illness. The person he was looking for was Master Qishan. The black horse carriage stopped in front of the mountain road. Ning Ke looked at the looming temple in the forest and the stone Buddha statue on the stone platform at the back of the Tile Mountain. He thought of Master Qishan and felt a little strange. He, who had inherited the fragments of consciousness after Lian's death, could clearly feel that the elder of the Lank Temple, who had lived in seclusion for decades, was an extraordinary person. Truly great people naturally had their own unique traits. Ning Ke did not know what Master Qishan liked or disliked. Logically speaking, a virtuous predecessor of the Buddhism sect should be kind and gentle. However, Ning Ke still cautiously reminded himself to maintain enough respect and be prepared for it. How could he keep a low profile? What kind of preparations should he make? He had made some changes to the black horse carriage. It still looked black, but it had become much dirtier. There was a hint of grease on it and it actually looked like a big black umbrella. The big black horse was also covered in dirt by him. He even smeared a few large patches of brown tree sap on its body. The big black horse no longer looked as cool as it did in the wilderness. It looked extremely embarrassed. This was the preparation Ning Ke had made. Anyway, he was prepared to come as miserable as it looked. He had even prepared a handkerchief with ginger juice and a small leather pouch filled with blood. He planned to use the powder from Chenjinji Cosmetics store to make Song Song's little face even paler before seeing Master Qishan. After seeing Master Qishan, he would use the handkerchief to make his eyes red and squeeze the blood pouch to pretend to cough up blood. He did not believe that the Vedanta of the Buddhism sect could bear to ignore it. Who would dare to be more miserable than him? If someone dared to be more miserable than him and Sang Sang, he would probably really make that person miserable. At this moment, a young monk slowly walked up the mountain road. The monk's face was dark and his expression was calm. However, when he saw the broken black horse carriage and the big black horse at the entrance of the mountain road, the calmness on his face was immediately shattered into countless pieces of shock and then fell to the ground. He walked to the front of the horse carriage and looked at Ning-Kei through the window. He said helplessly, "How can you hide this from my master? My master is not this kind of person. Does he need Mr. 13 to spend so much effort? There is one more chapter. I will try to finish it before 12:30. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidien.com to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation." Chapter 547. The dark-skinned young monk, whose Buddhist name was Guan Hai, was the last disciple of the Lank Temple's elder, Master Chishan. He did not have any specific duties in the temple, but his seniority and status were extremely high, comparable to that of the abbot. Last winter, it was Guan Hai who personally went to Chang'an and handed the invitation to the Yulan Hungry Ghost Festival to Ningquebet. He also challenged him. Ning-Kei sat by the Yenming Lake for half a day and finally understood something. Then he returned to the Southgate Taoism Hall to fight with him, and narrowly won. Ning-Kei had a good impression of monk Guan Hai. Although this young monk had a determined temperament, he was extremely gentle and amiable. Monk Guan Hai had a longing for the academy and respected the disciples of the second floor of the academy because his teacher had once consulted the headmaster of the academy and constantly praised him. This is indeed the Lank Temple's territory. I wanted to keep a low profile and not disturb you. I secretly met Master Chishan and left after finishing my business, but you still found out. Ning-Kei walked out of the horse carriage and looked at Guan Hai with a smile. Monk Guan Hai looked at the dusty horse carriage and said with a bitter smile, "You are not low profile. I received a letter from the Divine Hall a few days ago and knew that you were attacked on the way. Uncle, when did you break the realm again?" Monk Guan Hai suddenly felt that something had happened to Ningquebet. It was very different from when they met in Chang'an last winter. He vaguely guessed the truth, and could not help but exclaim. Ning-Kei said, "I told you in Chang'an to call me senior brother." Monk Guan Hai hesitated for a moment and listened to his request. He said, 13th senior. Brother, when we met last year, you were still in the see-through state. How did you break the realm in such a short time? Did you have an adventure again? As a Buddhist disciple, his temperament was calm and determined. Moreover, Monk Guan Hai's state was quite high. But at this moment, his voice was slightly trembling. Ning-Kei said, "How can there be so many adventures? If you can often leave the Tile Mountain and the Lank Temple to fight with people in the world, it will not be so difficult to increase your state." Monk Guan Hai looked at him with envy and awe. The cultivation world knew that Ning-Kei had only been in the academy for a few years, but now he had become a grand cultivator of the knowing destiny state. It was really shocking. Although it was a great pleasure to be looked at by a young Buddhist master, Ning-Kei did not have the time and energy to enjoy it. He said, "I wrote you a letter in advance. Did you read it?" Guan Hai looked at the black horse carriage and said, "Yes. How is your senior sister?" Guan Hai looked at the black horse carriage and said, "Yes. How is she?" Then he said worriedly, "I asked Yi Hongyu to help me suppress the cold aura in my body. It shouldn't worsen for a while, but it's better to solve this as soon as possible. When can I see Master Chishan?" Monk Guan Hai looked embarrassed and said, "My master builds a hut and meditates in the mountain behind the temple all year round. He does not receive guests." Guan King is and said, "Master of Guan. Monk Guan Hai shook his head and explained, "In the past, my master never attended the Grand Guan Tian King Festival. Even when I was cultivating Buddhism with my master, I only listened to his teachings through the door." Ning-Kei raised his eyebrows when he heard this. If he did not meet with guests, then what was the point of him coming? He had made up his mind. If that was the case, he would have to force his way into the mountain. At this moment, Monk Guan Hai said, but my master will come out of seclusion for a day. Ning Kei's raised eyebrows calmed down. He looked at Monk Guanhai and said helplessly, "You are a monk from the Tile Mountain, not a storyteller from Chang'an. Can you not speak with such a big breath?" Monk Guanhai smiled apologetically and suggested, "My master will come out of seclusion the day after tomorrow. 13th brother, why don't you stay in the temple for 2 days? Even though it can't be compared to the academy, there is still some scenery." Ning Kei thought that Song Song's condition had stabilized recently, and she had been enjoying the scenery on the horse carriage. Since they had come all the way to the Lank Temple, he should take her around. He should at least see what the 1,000-year-old temple looked like, especially since he was a disciple of the academy and close to Mistress Jian. He should pay his respects to the tomb in the temple. That's good. He thought of a question and asked Monk Guanhai, "Since Master Qishan has been in seclusion for many years, why did he come to the Yulan Hungry Ghost Festival this year? I know that the imperial courts of the Central Plains are here to discuss the Desolate Man's invasion. The cultivation sects might be here because of the legend of the underworld invasion." Monk Guanhai thought of something and looked at Ning Kei with a complicated gaze. He said, "Maybe so." Ning Kei understood what the young monk was thinking and asked with a smile, "It is said that I am the son of Yama. Are you afraid of standing in front of me?" Monk Guanhai's gaze returned to peace. He looked at Ning Kei with a smile and said, "What is there to be afraid of?" Ning Kei saw that his expression did not seem to be fake and could not help but feel puzzled. He asked, "Why?" Monk Guanhai bowed to the west with his palms pressed together. Then he straightened up and looked at Ning Kei seriously. He said, "Since the headmaster of the academy is willing to accept you as his core disciple, how can you be the son of Yama?" For the sake of peace, Ning Kei did not stay in the Lank Temple in the end. Monk Guanhai brought them to a secluded courtyard near the forest in the north. They did not disturb the monks in the temple. After a simple vegetarian meal and a simple chat, Monk Guanhai stood up and left. Ning Kei knew that although Master Qishan lived in seclusion all year round, Guanhai, as the future abbot of the Lank Temple, had to come out to receive the other cultivation sects during the Yulan Hungry Ghost Festival. Therefore, Ning Kei did not ask him to stay. As dusk approached, there was the sound of drums not far away. Then it was night. A servant in the temple boiled hot water. Ning Kei warmed Song Song's feet and put her to sleep. He changed a few talismans on her body and then lay down beside her with a peace of mind. When he woke up, the sky was just beginning to brighten. The bell of the Lank Temple rang again. He quietly listened to the rhythmic yet unrhythmic sound of the bell, which seemed dull but was actually quite refreshing. He felt much calmer. After breakfast, Ning Kei let the big black horse play in the forest in the courtyard. He put a thick fur coat on Sang Sang and took her through an iron gate in the south of the courtyard into the back garden of the Lank Temple. The monks in the temple should be doing their morning prayers. There was no other movement in the back garden except for the diligent birds that woke up early to survive and the insects that woke up early to survive but were unfortunately devoured. A faint fog permeated the forest. The main hall and a few side halls of the Lank Temple in the distance were faintly discernible in the fog. They looked extremely solemn and beautiful, as if the Buddhist land had really come to the human world. Ning Kei was not too interested in the scenery of the ancient temple. His eyes were fixed on the pagoda forest in the fog. This pagoda forest was made up of dozens of stone pagodas. Each stone pagoda enshrined the ashes of a powerful senior from the Buddhism sect. Logically speaking, such an environment would make people feel gloomy and scary. However, the chanting coming from the main hall in the distance calmed everything down. The pagoda forest was quiet and the paths were complicated. Walking in it was like walking in a maze. If it was a first-time visitor, it would be easy to get lost. However, he walked in it with Sang Sang without any pause or hesitation. It was extraordinarily familiar, as if he had been here many times. Sang Sang raised her head and looked at him. She was a little surprised and puzzled. Ning Ke did not notice it himself. Even if he did, he would think that it was because he was too familiar with the map that eldest brother had drawn for him before he left. He probably would not have thought that it was because of the remnant consciousness of Lotus in the depths of his spiritual ocean that was guiding him. Walking to the northwest of the pagoda forest, he saw a tomb beside a moss-covered stone pagoda. The tomb was very ordinary and inconspicuous. However, in the pagoda forest where the remains of the Buddhism sect were enshrined in the Lank Temple, there was a very ordinary tomb. It was already very eye-catching and vaguely revealed an unusual feeling. Ning Ke held Sang Sang's hand and walked to the tomb. He noticed that there were some traces of moss on the tomb, but it looked very clean. It must have been taken care of frequently. He was satisfied, and his impression of the monks in the temple improved a little. He bowed deeply to the tomb. There was no tombstone in the tomb. However, he knew who was buried in the tomb. Buried in the tomb was a young woman. At least when she died, the woman was still very young. That woman was once the best dancer in the world, and had a very simple name. The person buried in the tomb was Jian Xiaoxiao, the elder sister of Mistress Jian from the House of Red Sleeves, the fiancée of the youngest uncle from the academy. If she had not been killed by Lotus, she would have been my youngest aunt. Youngest uncle might still be alive now, and even have a few children with her. The youngest of them would have taken the glorious position of youngest brother and fought with Chun Pippi for the honor of being the most talented. Ning Ke looked at the tomb, which had been cleaned often but had not been visited for many years. He smiled with mixed feelings and said in a low voice, "There will be a few more ancestors in the academy. But there are already many ancestors in the academy. I think the teacher won't mind having a few more." Sang Sang squatted down and reached out to pick up a leaf that had floated to the tomb last night. No one knew what she was thinking at this moment. She felt a little cold and subconsciously tightened the collar of her fur coat. Ning Ke held her in his arms and looked at the tomb in front of him. He could not help but feel touched when he thought of the beautiful woman who had danced in front of the Lank Temple and had died so miserably in the end. Logically speaking, as a disciple of the academy, I should hate Lian Xing very much. Even if I am cold-blooded and have never been harmed by Lian Xing, and have inherited some of his benefits, I cannot hate him. But as the only survivor of the murder in the general's mansion, why can't I hate your teacher? Sang Sang's headmaster was the former great divine priest of light, Wei Guangming. The former half of Ning Ke's life was full of despair and an abnormal desire for revenge. But now he said that he did not hate that person. I don't even hate Xiaoho now. Or it is hard to think of this person. He frowned and kept thinking. He murmured, "Am I really so cold-blooded?" "Not because you are cold-blooded, but because they are all dead." Sang Sang nestled in his arms and looked at the tomb. She said, "Everything will disappear with death. Hate a person and love a person, no matter how strong, will gradually forget." Ning Ke knew what she wanted to say, but he did not want to hear it. "I don't have anything today. Tomorrow I will go to Harbin to attend a friend's wedding. But I will not stop updating. Ahem, maybe that's it? Alas, if this continues, I will really die in a few days." To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian.com to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 548. That was the first rain after the drought in Hebei province. The rain was very cold. When Ning Ke found the baby girl under the pile of corpses, she was blue and purple all over and was about to die from hunger and cold. Since that rain, Ning Ke had been hiding many psychological shadows in his heart. As Sang Sang was seriously ill and on the verge of death, the shadows became heavier and heavier, and he hid them deeper and deeper. As time went by, Sang Sang's illness became less and less frequent. Although the military doctor in the stronghold could not completely cure the cold qi in her body, he still prescribed some symptomatic medicine. Other than making sure that she was accompanied by liquor and doing housework, Ning Ke had almost forgotten about this matter. Especially after Sang Sang began to cultivate the divine skills of West Hill Taoism, the cold aura in her body was like the thin snow in spring. Ning Ke had thought that she had completely recovered. However, who would have thought that Sang Sang would suddenly fall ill again, and this time, it was even more dangerous than when she was a child. The shadow hidden in the depths of Ning Ke's heart rose again. During the journey, he thought hard and worried. Even the headmaster could not cure Song Song's illness. Could the Lank Temple really cure her? Was Song Song's illness really just an illness, or was there destined to be a cold future waiting for the two of them? Because of these psychological shadows, Ning Ke had never discussed that with Sang Sang since she was very young. At this time, Sang Sang seemed to want to say something, but he did not want to hear it. Sang Sang wanted to say it. "Young master, do you know why I have been staring at you recently?" For some reason, Sang Sang began to call him young master again. Ning Ke smiled and said, "Because I am good-looking." Sang Sang said, "You are not the old Prince Long Qing. You are not worth being stared at." Ning Ke was slightly angry and said, "I said not to mention this." Sang Sang knew that he was pretending to be angry to hide something. She said softly, "You know the reason." Ning Ke knew the reason, but he did not want to say it. At this time, he looked like a little boy in a fit of pique. He was stubborn, naive, childish, easily angered, and even cried easily. At this time, Sang Sang was like a gentle and sensible big sister. She looked at him quietly and said in a gentle voice, "I am worried that I will never see you again after I die." Ning Ke's body trembled slightly when he finally heard the word from her mouth. Looking at the grave in front of them, Sang Sang curiously asked, "Where do people go after they die? Whether I turn into ashes or rot, I'm sealed by the stone bricks. But is that still me?" Ning Ke did not want her to stay in this kind of mood for a long time, because this kind of mood or thinking was very unhealthy for a seriously ill person. He wanted to change the topic, but he could not. Some say that death is nothingness. Some say that after death, one will go to the netherworld. "I'd rather go to the netherworld." Sang Sang looked at him and said seriously, "The underworld sounds terrible, but I can wait for you there." Looking at her pale face, Ning Ke untied his coat and put it on her shoulders. He said in a low voice, "People in the underworld will forget what happened in this world. You won't remember me then, so don't go." "What does death feel like?" Sang Sang looked at him and asked. There was no sadness or fear on her face, only curiosity, just like a child. She was very thin and small. Wearing Ning Ke's coat, she indeed looked like a child who had stolen an adult's clothes to wear. It looked a little funny, but it also showed a rare sense of cuteness. "Your face is a little pale from the cold. Hurry up and go back," Ning Ke said. At this time, although it was late autumn, it was not very cold around the Lank Temple. Song Song's little face was a little pale, but it was not because of the cold, but because of the cold aura in her body. Sang Sang was very clear about this. She stretched out her hands in front of Ning Quebec. Ning Ke was startled. He thought of many years ago, when Sang Sang was still a little girl and sometimes acted like a spoiled child. He felt a pain in his heart and blew a few warm breaths into her palms. Sang Sang took back her slightly warm hands and touched both sides of her cheeks. She said with some regret, "Young master, you always said that I was an ugly girl. I know that I was indeed born black. You always said that whiteness can cover all ugliness, so I always wanted to make myself whiter. After coming to Chang'an, I spent so much money to buy cosmetics from Chenjinji Cosmetics Store, but it was all in vain. Now that I'm really white, I can't make you happy." Ning Ke hugged her tighter and said, "No matter if you are black or white, as long as you can be as greedy and fierce as before, you can make young master happy." Hearing this, Sang Sang smiled happily, revealing 2 white teeth. She looked like a small animal in the forest of Min Mountain. She was very cute. Now Sang Sang was especially cute, often cute. That was because she used to think that there was no need to play cute in front of Ninkei, and she didn't need to play cute in front of others. But now she wanted Ninkei to think that she was cute. You haven't answered my previous question. What question? What does death feel like? I've never died. How would I know? Do you want me to dig youngest aunt out from the grave and let her tell you? Ninkei made a tasteless joke, and then realized that it was really not funny. He looked down at a dead autumn insect in the grass under his feet. After a long silence he said, "Actually, I do know. Death is a very uncomfortable thing, so don't die." Sangsang looked at him and said seriously, "Yes, I will try not to die." Ninkei touched her head and said, "Let's work hard together." In the misty forest, a drop of water suddenly fell, followed by several drops of water. The water drops were very small, even as fine as powder. They fell on his face and eyes, making them a little wet. Ninkei said, "Let's go back." Sangsang shook her head and said, "I still want to walk around." Ninkei said, "Your body can't stand the rain now." Sangsang untied the big black umbrella from her back and said, "It's hard even if I want to." Ninkei smiled and opened the big black umbrella. He held her hand and walked to the front hall of the Lank Temple. In the morning, it began to rain in the Lank Temple. The mist gradually dissipated, and the looming eaves and pagodas in the mist became clear. The Buddhist land had returned to the human world. Ninkei looked at the ancient temple in the light autumn rain and saw a Buddha statue on the top of the mountain behind the temple. The material used to carve the Buddha statue should be some kind of precious white hard stone. The carving was simple but smooth. At this time, the rain fell on the peaceful face of the Buddha statue, like tears, adding a bit of pity. Even at such a distance, the face of the Buddha statue could still be seen clearly. One could imagine how huge the Buddha statue was. When the believers looked up at it from the foot of the mountain, it was easy to feel a sense of worship. He pointed to the giant Buddha at the top of the mountain and said, "It is said that this is the Buddha who founded the Buddhism sect." Sangsang looked at him and asked, "Do you want to worship it? If you don't go up the mountain, you can worship it from afar. The Buddha is a human, and so am I. The Buddha has read the Ming hand scroll, and so have I. Why should I worship him?" There were faint sounds of people and wheels coming from the main hall. It was still early in the morning, and the Lank Temple did not receive visitors. So they must be official envoys or representatives of cultivation sects staying in the temple like Ningquebec. Ninkei did not pay attention to these people and said, "Of course, if the Buddha can really show his spirit and cure your illness, why don't I worship him for 3 days and 3 nights after that?" Suddenly, a voice came from the main hall. "You need to be sincere to ask the Buddha to cure you. Do you think the Buddha is a doctor that you can find anywhere? If you are not sincere enough, even if the Buddha can cure your wife's illness, he will not cure her." A few luxurious carriages came from the main hall of the Lank Temple. The voice that was full of blame and arrogance came from one of the carriages. Ninkei had thought that only the people from the Ueluan kingdom who believed in Buddhism would say something like that. However, when his gaze fell on the luxurious carriages, he was surprised to find that they were from the South Jin kingdom. Even though it was raining in autumn, it was still a little arrogant to drive a carriage in the quiet ancient temple. Since they were staying in the temple, they must not be ordinary people. Looking at the carriages, Ninkei thought that if the people in the carriages were not from the South Jin kingdom, they must be disciples of the Sword Garret. No matter who they were not people he wanted to see now. The carriage that had made the sound stopped not far from Ninkei and Sangsang. The curtains were lifted, revealing a pale but handsome young face. The young man looked at Ninkei and said unhappily, "In a Buddhist temple, you should worship the Buddha. If you don't even know this, I don't know why the monks in the temple let you stay." Ninkei asked, "Do you know me?" The young man said mockingly, "Do I need to know you?" Ninkei said, "I thought you recognized me, so you deliberately said this for me to hear." Then you sincerely apologized to me and finally achieved your goal of getting to know me. Hearing this, the young man was stunned for a while before he understood what Ning Ke wanted to say. He asked in disbelief, "You mean I deliberately approached you?" Ning Ke smiled and said, "Recently, many people have indeed thought of many strange ways to get to know me. I thought you deliberately flirted with me with the same idea, but I didn't expect that to be the case." His calm words hid a very mean sense of ridicule. Ning Ke had been feeling uneasy since Song Song's illness. After the battle in the Red Lotus Temple, he was even more depressed because of those very strange things. Although the joy of breaking through the knowing destiny state was slightly alleviated, he still needed a channel or an outlet to vent. At this moment, he saw the carriages and heard the sound coming from the carriage. The young man was furious. He pointed at Ning Ke through the window and scolded coldly, "Who do you think you are?" Hearing this, Ning Ke was very happy. He tilted his head and clamped the big black umbrella on his shoulder. Then, he began to roll up his sleeve. At this moment, a hand appeared from the window and forcefully pulled the young man back. Ning Ke felt very disappointed. He thought to himself, "Who is so boring and insensible? If you don't drink too much tonight, I will write some more. But I guess it will be too high. But, okay, forget what I said. Let me die." To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidien.com to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 549. The hand in the carriage window only appeared in Ning Ke's sight for a very short time, but it was enough for him to clearly see some features of the hand: the slender and stable fingers, the soft and wide palm, and the thin calluses. It was a hand suitable for holding a sword, and the calluses also seemed to prove that this hand often held the hilt. Ordinary sword masters in the cultivation world all used flying swords, except for one sect. Coincidentally, that famous sect was located in the South Jin Kingdom. It was the sword garret founded by the Sage of Sword, Liu Bai. Because of these inferences, Ning Ke vaguely guessed the origin of the hand. So he seemed to be extremely regretful, but in fact, he was secretly vigilant. A voice rang out in the luxurious carriage, presumably from the owner of the hand. The voice was calm and gentle, and he apologized to Ning Ke on behalf of the young man. Ning Ke listened to the apology and sensed the calmness in the man's voice. Although his expression did not change, he was a little shocked. Although he had guessed that the man was from the sword garret, he did not expect that he was a powerhouse in the knowing destiny state. What was more difficult for him to understand was that a powerhouse in the knowing destiny state would show such weakness. The powerhouse from the sword garret in the carriage apologized sincerely and gently. Ning Ke could feel the kindness and sincerity that he wanted to convey. Especially after confirming that he was a powerhouse in the knowing destiny state, the kindness and sincerity increased many times in a very short period of time. Sang Sang was in the ancient Lank temple, and she needed to be treated by the monks of the Buddhism sect. Ning Ke did not want to make things unmanageable. Seeing the sincere apology, he waved his hand to signal that it was over. After a moment of silence in the carriage, the sincere and kind voice of the powerhouse from the sword garret sounded again. "My young master was indeed rude. But since you are here to worship Buddha, it is good to be more sincere." Though this advice was well-intentioned, it was difficult to repress a hint of instruction. Ning Ke thought that the man was after all a powerhouse in the knowing destiny state, so he was not surprised by the tone of his words. He shook his head and said, "You people in the South Jin Kingdom worship Haotian, but you come here to worship Buddha. Buddha may not be very happy. I am the same. I have never worshipped Buddha before, and now that there is a problem, Buddha may not believe me no matter how sincere and respectful I am. In this case, why should I care about my attitude?" The powerhouse from the sword garret sighed in the carriage, as if he was a little sorry to hear such an answer from Ning Quebec. He said goodbye, and several carriages slowly moved to the East Side Hall. The Yulan Hungry Ghost Festival was a grand event in the world. Many bigwigs would gather in the Lank Temple in this autumn. Especially in a few days, they might meet a famous bigwig in the cultivation world. Ning Ke did not care too much about this encounter, even though he had guessed that young man's real identity. The autumn rain became heavier and fell on the surface of the big black umbrella. Although the rain did not penetrate through the umbrella and wet them, the temperature in the temple became lower and lower. Ning Ke took Song Song's hand and prepared to go back to the yard to rest. Before leaving, he glanced at the top of the Hua mountain in the distance. The Buddha stone statue was quietly watching the world under the mountain. Its face, wet by the rain, looked more and more compassionate, as if it was sympathizing with the people who were trapped in the trap of life, death, sickness, and aging. If what Buddha said is true, and there is a cycle of karma in the world, then I have done many evil things in my life. I don't think I will get any good retribution, but I have been very careful not to stain Song Song's hands with too much blood. I have really tried my best. Even if there is retribution, it will only be on me, not on her. Ning Ke looked at the Buddha statue in the autumn rain and prayed devoutly. If you insist on taking your anger out on her because of my evil deeds, or even let her leave, I will destroy your biggest stone statue in the world. I will burn the Lank Temple and the 72 temples of the Ueluan Kingdom. I will kill all the monks in the world and destroy your Buddhism sect. Several luxurious horse carriages from the South Jin Kingdom quietly stopped in front of a side hall of the Lank Temple. Several middle-aged men with sharp eyes looked around coldly, protecting the master of the hall. There were also a few people who looked like officials. They were sheltering from the rain in the corridor in front of the hall, but they did not enter the hall. The side hall of the Buddhist temple became darker in the rain. There were more than 10 stone statues of venerables in the hall, emitting a faint cold light. These statues were either smiling or sad. Their hands were exposed in the air, some were pressed together, and some were spread out. Their movements were different, revealing a wonderful sense of beauty and solemnity. A middle-aged man in a green robe stopped in front of these stone statues and looked at them. His hands were slender and steady behind his back. He was the powerhouse from the sword Garrett who had spoken in the carriage earlier. Looking at these stone statues, he sighed and said, "The Lank Temple, the Ueluan White Tower Temple, and the Wanyan Tower Temple in Chang, and all worship these stone statues of venerables. It is said that people with innate wisdom can see the true meaning of the emblematic gestures of Buddhism from these stone statues. Unfortunately, I can only feel the existence of the wisdom, but not understand it." The side hall was silent. The face of the nobleman from the South Jin Kingdom who had reprimanded Ning Ke was very ugly. Although he could not say anything to the powerhouse from the sword Garrett, he could not control his emotions. He was very displeased that the man had apologized for him to Ning Ke, which made him feel extremely humiliated. The middle-aged man looked at the gloomy face of the nobleman and sighed in his heart. He slowly comforted him. There are many hidden talents in the cultivation world. What's more, the Lank Temple is holding the Yulan Hungry Ghost Festival. Those strange people who rarely step into the human world may also appear. Although the South Jin Kingdom is not afraid of them, why should we provoke these troubles? Accompanying the nobleman to visit the Lank Temple was a gray-haired old man. Looking at his hunched body, he should be an ordinary person. He strangely held a chessboard under his armpit, and his expression was very cold and arrogant. This old man was the national champion of the South Jin Kingdom and was also known as the chess sage. He had rarely lost in chess and could enter and leave the palace without any restrictions. That was why he had developed an arrogant temperament. Thinking of the nobleman's identity, he thought that he would not be afraid of trouble, so he said unhappily, "Mr. Cheng is the junior brother of the sword sage. Why would he be afraid of these small troubles?" And from the accent of the young man with the black umbrella, "He is a Tang, so we should not avoid him." The young nobleman thought that this was the truth. He looked at the middle-aged man and wanted to hear his explanation. The middle-aged man's name was Ching Ziching, and he was one of the few powerhouses in the knowing destiny state in the Sword Garret. Naturally, he did not care about the old man's attitude, and even ignored the young nobleman's gaze. He explained indifferently, Master Qishan has done a great favor for the South Jin Kingdom. If he really causes trouble in the Lank Temple, neither my senior brother nor His Majesty will be happy. His Majesty was naturally the Emperor of the South Jin Kingdom, and his senior brother was naturally the Sage of Sword, Liu Bai. Now that Ching Ziching had invited these two people, the side hall immediately returned to silence, and no one dared to object. Ching Ziching walked out of the side hall, and found a young official of the South Jin Kingdom, who was sheltering from the rain in the corridor. He signaled him to follow him to a secluded place with his eyes. Looking at the young official's slightly pale face, he asked, "Is it him?" The young official's name was Xie Qingyun. He was the famous third young master Xie of the South Jin Kingdom in the past. Later, after Ning Kei's success in the second-floor examination of the academy, the third young master Xie left the academy and returned to the South Jin Kingdom. With the reputation of being a young Tanhua, it did not take long for him to have his own position in the imperial court of the South Jin Kingdom. This year, the Emperor of the South Jin Kingdom appointed him as a close subordinate of His Highness the Crown Prince. Hearing Ching Ziching's question, Xie Qingyun nodded with a somewhat complicated expression. Ching Ziching was speechless. In fact, when he saw the big black umbrella and the young man and woman under it, he had vaguely guessed their identities. When the young man also showed an indifferent attitude towards the Buddhism sect, he knew that his guess was right. He understood that it was the right choice to apologize on behalf of His Highness. If His Highness knew who the young man under the big black umbrella was, he would definitely not let it go. Today, the Lank Temple would definitely be in trouble. Even though he had entered the knowing destiny state, he did not want to have a dispute with that young man. Although he was not afraid of him, he did not want to offend him and the powerful and invincible sect behind him. Ching Ziching pondered for a while and looked at him, saying, Master Qishan will open his hut tomorrow, and Ning Kei will definitely appear. So you have to keep an eye on His Highness. Even if His Highness knows Ning Kei's identity, you can't make him angry. Xie Qingyun understood what Ching Ziching was worried about. After a little hesitation, he agreed. However, having been a subordinate of the prince's mansion for half a year, he was very clear about the temperament of His Highness the Crown Prince whom he would serve for a lifetime. Naturally, he knew how difficult it was to make His Highness not angry. Suddenly, he thought of a possibility. Looking at Ching Ziching's face, he forced himself to pluck up his courage and said softly, I heard that the Sage of Swords' younger brother was blinded by that person? Ching Ziching's eyes gradually became cold. Looking at Xie Qingyun, he said coldly, I know that you were once a classmate of that person in the academy for a period of time. I also know how painful it is for you to see your former classmate climb to the peak of the world and leave you far behind. However, facing this situation, you can either work hard to improve your cultivation state or simply give up the idea of comparing with that person. Any other means will only make you more painful and meaningless. Don't think about using the sword to kill people. No, don't even think about using the sword of the Sword Garret to kill people. Ching Ziching thought of the head in the ancient pond of the Sword Garret and his fellow disciples who were blind and had been practicing their swordsmanship in the dark room all day long. He said coldly, because the thing that the Sword Garret hates the most is letting others borrow our swords. He was talking about the former great divine priest of judgment of the West Hill Divine Palace, who lent Chao Xiaoshu's sword to Lu Yiqing through an important figure buried in the Sword Garret by the Judicial Department, in an attempt to provoke a war between the Sword Garret and the Academy. The result of that incident was that Lu Yiqing was blinded by Ning Kei and was sent back to the Sword Garret after several months. The Sage of Sword, Liu Bai, drew a paper sword and lent it to Yi Hongyu. The former great divine priest of judgment was killed on the seat of heavenly black jade. Xie Qingyun only knew that the Sage of Swords' younger brother and Ning Ke had a shocking battle at the side gate of the academy, but he did not know the secret of the cultivation world behind this incident. He suddenly felt that Mr. Cheng's eyes had become two sharpest swords. His eyes felt a sharp pain, and he lowered his head in fear and pain, not daring to say anything more. I ran as fast as I could and finally got home in the afternoon. Then I worked hard and finished the 3rd chapter today. This is the 1st chapter. There are 2 more chapters. Keep writing and try to finish the next chapter before 9:30. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian.com to vote for it. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 550. In the autumn rain, Ning Ke seemed to be praying devoutly, but in fact, he was coldly threatening the Buddha statue on top of the tile mountain. But he knew very well that the Buddha was long dead, and the one who could cure him was Master Qishan in the tile mountain. So the next day, he took Sangsang to the tile mountain along the mountain path in the black horse carriage. The mountain path behind the temple was still quiet. The locust trees beside the path were still wet, and some traces of carriage wheels could be faintly seen on the smooth surface of the path. Ning Ke sat by the window and looked at the traces on the mountain path. He frowned slightly and thought that the Yulan Hungry Ghost assembly would be held in front of the Lank Temple in a few days. Even if the diplomatic corps or the cultivation world wanted to discuss the desolate man's southward invasion or the underworld invasion in advance, they should be in the Lank Temple. Why were there so many horse carriages entering the Tile Mountain today? He naturally thought of the nobleman from the South Jin Kingdom, whom he had met in the Lank Temple yesterday morning. He had already guessed the identity of the nobleman at that time. Apart from the Emperor of the South Jin Kingdom, only the Crown Prince was able to have a knowing Destiny State cultivator from the Sword Garret accompanying him. But what did these people from the South Jin Kingdom want to do in Tile Mountain? Monk Guan Hai appeared under the big locust tree again. He put his palms together and bowed to the horse carriage. He smiled and said, "I thought Senior Brother 13 would arrive earlier." Ning Ke got off the carriage and returned the bow. He said casually, "Are there already many people here?" Guan Hai said, "Yes." Ning Ke asked, "I don't understand what this means." Guan Hai was slightly stunned. Only then did he realize that Ning Ke really did not know what it meant for his teacher to open the hut. He explained seriously. Every time Elder Qishan opened the hut, he would choose a fated person to answer the person's questions or help that person point in a certain direction in life. It was not rare for a Buddhism sect master to enlighten a follower. There were many such legends in the Yueluan kingdom. But in the eyes of the world, Master Qishan was not an ordinary Buddhism sect master. Moreover, decades ago, when he opened the hut to answer the fated person's questions, what he said was later proven to be a reality. This seemed to prove that Master Qishan could predict the future. This was even more magical than the great divine priest of revelation of the West Hill Divine Palace. It was even similar to the legendary Buddha's ability to grant all requests, which naturally made the world crazy. After the murder at the Lank Temple, Master Qishan had shut himself in his hut for many years, probably because he was heartbroken by the evil of his old friend, Lian Xing, and also because of the blood in front of the temple. This year, it was rumored that the master would open his hut for a day, and it naturally became a grand event in the cultivation world. The cultivators and nobles who participated in the Yulan Hungry Ghost Festival all chose to enter Hua Mountain without hesitation. They wanted to see if they were lucky enough to become the fated person in the master's eyes. Ning Ke did not know that the Lank Temple Elder meant to be an elder of the temple. To say it, moon. Temple. Temple. Which mountain was? The temple. Too, but in Quebec was a temple was to say. Temple. The temple. Temple. The temple. Temple of the Temple Temple. 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 Temple 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 Temple. Of Temple Temple. 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 Is Ming. What happened? Ning Ke asked. Monk Guan Hai said, a guest from afar. Senior Brother Abbot used the bell to summon me to welcome him. Ning Ke said, then go quickly. Monk Guan Hai was very grateful. He sincerely apologized to Ning Ke, bowed to Sang Sang through the window, and left in a hurry. Looking at the back of the young monk drifting away on the mountain road, Ning Ke raised his eyebrows slightly and said nothing. He sat on the cushion in front of the carriage and kicked the big black horse lightly, saying, let's go. The big black horse was a little sleepy after playing with autumn grasshoppers in the temple last night. He woke up after being kicked by Ningquebec. He braced himself and strode toward the depths of the Hua Mountain with his head held high. Song Song's worried voice came from the carriage. It must be a big shot. Someone who could make the Lank Temple ring the bell solemnly and make Monk Guan Hai go to the temple personally must have an extraordinary background. Ning Ke had long understood this. However, no matter how self-abased and self-pitying he was, he had to admit a fact with some narcissism, joy, and helplessness. There was no one in the world who had a more powerful background than him. To put it simply, no matter where the person who made the Lank Temple ring the bell came from, he could not be more powerful than him. Because of this, he was a little confused about the identity of the guests in front of the temple. Why would Monk Guan Hai accompany them instead of him, a disciple of the academy? He found it funny and confused when he heard Song Song's worry. Sang Sang had always been someone who did not care about such things. What was she worried about? Sang Sang said in a low voice, when Master Qishan comes out of seclusion, he will only choose one fated person to answer his questions and puzzles. Today, so many people came to Hua Mountain, and there must be many bigwigs. I wonder if the Master will choose me as the fated person to treat my illness. Ning Ke said with a smile, it's enough that you are fated with me. Why would you be fated with an old monk who has lived for 100 years? As for the others, you don't have to worry about them. Sang Sang pushed open the front door of the horse carriage and looked at his side profile. She said, I'm just worried that it will be like when we were young, or when we entered the second floor of the academy. Young master, you will have to compete with many people. Who dares to compete with us? Even if there is a lunatic who is not afraid of death and wins against us, would the old monk dare not treat you? Not to mention that he once learned from the headmaster of the academy and has some old friendship with the academy, even if he doesn't care about the old friendship. Now we are both in the academy and the divine hall. With the Great Spirit and Haotian divine light in our chests and the headmaster's handwritten letter in our sleeves, we are really invincible. At that time, he can cure us even if he wants to. The horse carriage traveled on the quiet mountain road, and the sound of rolling over the slightly wet road was very soft. Ning Ke's disrespectful voice to Tile Mountain floated among the branches and leaves of the locust tree and the autumn tree, lingering for a long time. The mountain was flat, and the horse carriage traveled on the mountain road very easily. However, the distance between the two places had become slightly longer. The black horse carriage arrived at the Jumping Tiger Stream when the morning fog dissipated and the autumn sun rose from the trees. The Jumping Tiger Stream was a famous scenery of Tile Mountain in the past. However, over the years, as more and more old monks chose to live in seclusion here, the monks in the Lank Temple had tightened the management of the Tile Mountain. They would only open it for a period of time every year. Recently, it was naturally closed, so there were no tourists by the stream. No tourists did not mean that there were no visitors. There was a stone bridge over the Jumping Tiger Stream. On the other side of the stone bridge was a dense autumn forest. On this side of the bridge was a huge stone platform. On the stone platform there was a green tree with a huge crown. Under the green tree there was a small stone table. There were already dozens of people gathered under the big tree. Some were standing, some were talking in low voices, and some were silent. Through the gaps in the crowd, One could vaguely see an old monk dressed in yellow robes playing chess with someone. The black horse carriage stopped a long distance away from the big green tree. Ning Ke looked from afar and sensed the strong and weak auras of those people. He confirmed that they were cultivators from many different cultivation sections. The people around the stone table under the big green tree were mostly focused on the chess game. Some of them surrounded a luxuriously dressed young man and were respectfully talking about something. It was the young man from the South Jin Kingdom that Ning Ke had met in the Lank Temple yesterday morning. Since Ning Ke had guessed his identity, he would not be surprised by this scene. However, he could not help but feel a little emotional when he thought of the ordinary cultivators who had no hope of achieving great Tao. They had cultivated for half their lives, but in the end, they still had to sell their skills to the royal family. When he saw the familiar figure of a young girl under a row of green bamboos dozens of feet away from the big green tree, he could not help but feel emotional from these cultivators back to himself. It was obvious that many cultivators tried to approach the young girl under the green bamboos, but did not dare to do so due to fear or other reasons. They only dared to greet her from afar. Therefore, the young girl only stood quietly under the row of green bamboos. She was as lonely and strong as the green bamboos. However, in Ning Ke's eyes, she was as fragile as the green bamboos. He had not seen her for more than a year, and she had lost a lot of weight. My mood is not calm, and my train of thought is affected. I can only write 2,500 words at this time. I am afraid that everyone will wait, so I update first. Then the next chapter will be more than 4,000 word. I will try to finish it before 1 o'clock. I am really King risking my life. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian.com to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 551. Under the effect of the talisman array, the black horse carriage moved silently on the mountain road, as if it was riding the wind. Many horses were grazing on the grassy slope beside the mountain stream, covering the sound of the big black horse's hooves. Dozens of cultivators under the big tree did not notice the arrival of Ning Ke and Sang Sang. But the girl under the bamboo wall noticed it. Having entered the knowing destiny state, she could clearly perceive the slightest change of the chi of heaven and earth around her. She was originally the most talented talisman master in the world. Now that she had entered the state of divine talisman master, how could she not notice the aura of talisman Taoism from the black horse carriage? Or was it because she had been silently looking at the direction of the mountain road, wanting to see someone? Looking at the black horse carriage that gradually stopped in the distance, the girl's eyes were filled with joy and slight confusion. Then she calmed down and slowly walked over there. Many cultivators on the plain by the stream had been silently paying attention to the girl this entire time, including that noble young master who was surrounded by many cultivators to curry favor. As the girl left the bamboo and walked towards the black carriage in the distance, their gazes subconsciously followed her, appearing rather perplexed. Some people were guessing who was in the black horse carriage that could make the world-famous calligraphy addict move to greet him. Some smart people or people who were more familiar with the Tang Empire had already guessed the truth and could not help but show a shocked expression. Ning Ke did not pay attention to the expressions and reactions of the cultivators under the big tree. He just silently watched the girl walking toward him. As she came closer and closer, he watched the face that he had not seen for a long time and rarely thought of but had not forgotten become clearer and clearer in his sight. He became more and more nervous. The girl had indeed lost a lot of weight, but she was still beautiful. Her eyes were as clear as an autumn lake, and her eyelashes were thin and sparse. Her lips were thin and bright, and her black hair cascaded over her shoulders like a waterfall. Her white dress was like a white dandelion. As she moved, her simple and clean cloth shoes moved out of her dress from time to time and then floated back into her dress like leaves in the wind. It seemed as if nothing had changed from before. In the past year and a half, Ning Ke often received letters from the Great River Kingdom. The letters seemed to have the smell of ink, and were written in a graceful handwriting about daily affairs, never about love. After reading these letters, he would either give them to Sang Sang or throw them away. He would also write back, but he rarely wrote anything in the letters. Most of the time, he would just send some sections that he was satisfied with. Last year, when he decided to attend the Yulan Hungry Ghost Festival at the Lank Temple, Ning Ke had thought that the calligraphy addict would definitely be invited, and she might really come. He had thought many times about what it would be like when they met again, what she would say, and what he should say. However, the more he thought about it, the more confused he became. The more he thought about it, the more nervous and helpless he became. So he stopped thinking about it and forgot about it until he saw her reappear in front of him by the mountain stream. Ning Ke didn't know what to do as he looked at the girl who was slowly approaching him. He hoped that he could hear some sounds coming from the carriage behind him. He hoped that he could hear Sang Sang's fake cough. Even if it was just the sound of her clothes moving, it would calm him down and make him look more indifferent. Mo Shanshan walked to the front of the carriage. The big black horse found that it was the beautiful mistress that it first recognized and liked. It shook its head and neighed, looking very happy. Mo Shanshan smiled and raised her hand to touch its head. The big black horse desperately tried to squeeze its huge head into her palm and rubbed it affectionately. It looked very funny. Ning Ke patted its back, silently warning it not to be too excited and nervous and lose its composure. At the same time, he also told himself not to be too excited and nervous and lose his composure. In the carriage, Sang Sang still did not make any sound. But at this time, he was much calmer. He looked at Mo Shanshan and bowed with hands folded in front. Mo Shanshan returned the bow and bowed to the black carriage. She said calmly, "Greetings, Lady of Light." Sang Sang's voice finally came from the carriage, "Greetings, Hill Master." The first words of the two girls were very calm and polite. Ning Ke could not help but be speechless when he heard Sang Sang's calm and gentle voice, which actually sounded like a bigwig from the West Hill Divine Palace. Just when he was at a loss of what to do, Sang Sang's voice came from the carriage again. "Young master, I'm a little tired. I want to rest in the carriage." Ning Ke understood that she was giving him a chance to talk to Mo Shanshan alone. After a moment of silence, he grunted and walked in front of Mo Shanshan. He said, "Let's take a walk by the stream." Looking at the back of the young man and woman walking to the mountain stream, the big black horse lightly kicked its hind hooves and snorted. It praised in its heart that they were really a beautiful couple. Of course, Sang Sang was also very good. But why didn't Ning Ke want both of them? If humans wanted women and needed to marry, then he should just marry both. Looking at this guy's current glory, who would dare to stop him? Back then, I already had a lover in the southern military camp. But when I saw that snow-white mare in the wilderness, I still did not flinch and wanted to have a go with her. Love really needs courage. Just when the big black horse kept mocking Ning Ke and felt pity for him and wanted to encourage him to have more courage, Sang Sang's question suddenly came from the carriage behind him. Sang Sang asked, "Are you familiar with Miss Shanshan?" The big black horse's body suddenly stiffened. He knew that Sang Sang had seen all the intimate scenes between him and Mo Shanshan. He could not help but feel terrified. As a big animal and pet of the Ning family from the old brush pen shop to the Yenming Lake, he knew better than anyone else in the world that in this family, the mistress would always be the most powerful. This had nothing to do with Sang Sang becoming the Lady of Light of the West Hill Divine Palace. After all, the world had already been operating like this when she was still a little handmaiden. Under such circumstances, the big black horse knew that any explanation he gave would be a cover-up, and he would most likely die an ugly death. So he bared his teeth and looked at the horse carriage. He kept wagging his tail and tried his best to play dumb to please Sang Sang. On the grassy slope beside the mountain stream, there were many horses eating grass with their heads lowered. They should be the mounts of the cultivators who came to visit the mountain. Not far away there were some wild goats playing. Both parties were silent and peaceful. Ning Ke and Mo Shanshan walked to the side of the stream and were also silent. However, the atmosphere was not as peaceful as on the grassy slope. Although nothing happened, it was really difficult for them to live in peace. There was an awkward and uneasy atmosphere. The silence had to be broken. If Mo Shanshan still needed to take the first step, eldest brother of the academy would probably mock him for many years if he knew about it, no matter how gentle he was. That was indeed not manly. So Ning Ke looked at her and asked, "How have you been in the past year?" The two of them had been communicating through letters for the past year and a half. Even if they were talking about trivial matters, they would also talk about recent events. There was no need for him to ask specifically. After such a long silence and such a serious tone, he ended up asking such a question. This could only mean that his brain was still not working well at this time. I broke through the realm in calligraphy cultivation. Mo Shanshan did not laugh or feel annoyed. She answered calmly and seriously. As she spoke, the serious expression on her face and the focused gaze in her eyes gave this simple question and answer a sense of ritual. Then she smiled and asked, "What about you? You rarely mentioned it in your letters." "So did I. I broke through the realm in calligraphy cultivation." After a short pause, Ning Ke smiled bitterly and said, "I killed a few people along the way." Hearing this, Mo Shanshan looked into his eyes seriously and confirmed that her previous perception was not wrong. She said joyfully, "When did you break through the realm? That's really worth congratulating." Ning Ke looked at her and said with a smile, "You became a divine talisman master in spring. I did it much later than you. What's there to be happy about? Now that I think about it, the letter you left when you left Chang'an was really prophetic. When you saw the more magnificent rivers and mountains, I was still struggling to climb in the mountain stream." Mo Shanshan smiled and said, "But now you have seen the scenery at the top of the mountain. Well, the scenery here is not bad." Ning Ke moved his gaze from the bottomless mountain stream by the cliff to the peaks of Hua Mountain. Mo Shanshan suddenly thought of the thing that worried her the most after they parted. She asked, "I was really shocked to know that you were going to duel with Xiahou. At that time, no one in the Great River Kingdom, including the headmaster, was optimistic about you." Ning Ke looked into her beautiful eyes and asked, "What about you?" Mo Shanshan thought for a while and said, "Although there is really no reason to think that you will win, I don't know why I always feel that even if you lose, you will be fine. At least you will not die." Ning Ke was slightly curious and asked, "You actually have so much confidence in me?" Mo Shanshan smiled and said, "That year when we left the front gate of the Devil's Doctrine, Yi Hongyu once told me in the hanging basket that a shameless person like you usually has a long life. Was this the saying that a scourge could live for 1,000 years? Ning Ke was a little annoyed and said, "I don't like to hear such slander. Although she is now the great divine priest of judgment, if she really pushed me, I would dare to find trouble with her." Mo Shanshan did not mention this matter anymore and asked, "How does it feel to defeat Xiahou?" "The feeling of defeating the enemy is not important. Even if I can't beat the enemy, it's fine as long as I can kill the enemy. So you should ask me, how does it feel to kill Xiahou?" Just like on the journey in the wilderness, Ning Ke began to instill the cold-blooded and realistic fighting methods and ideas into her habitually. He said, "There was a moment of ecstasy, then exhaustion and confusion, and finally, it all returned to the peace after getting what I wanted." Mo Shanshan listened to him silently. Looking at the extremely faint scar on his face and the extremely shallow dimple, she was a little absent-minded. Thinking of the fierce battle on the winter lake in the rumors, she always felt that there were many things hidden under his calm expression that made her heart palpitate. She even felt that his dimple was filled with fresh blood, and she could not help but feel a little sad. "When this matter really spread to the Great River Kingdom, I didn't know that you had such a miserable childhood. she said with a slightly trembling voice, unable to hide her love for him. Ning Ke did not want to talk about this topic. Looking at her cheeks that were slightly thinner than before, he joked, "The flesh on your face is all gone. It seems that you have had a hard time in the past 2 years." He had originally wanted to make a joke to dilute the previous depressed atmosphere, but as soon as he said it, he knew that it was wrong. As the world's calligraphy addict, she was loved by the master of calligrapher and respected by her peers. She broke through the knowing destiny state in spring and became an extremely rare young divine talisman master. Her life could be said to be extremely smooth and happy. What else could make her worry and become haggard other than love? If it was an ordinary woman, upon hearing these words, even if she didn't immediately burst into tears, she would at least reveal a sorrowful expression. At the very least, she would force a smile with a hint of reluctance, which would make the man feel guilty. Emo Shanshan was not an ordinary woman, so she just smiled and said nothing. Ning Ke looked at her gratefully and said, "I thought that the Lank Temple would definitely invite you to the Yulan Hungry Ghost Festival, but the envoys of various countries are discussing the desolate man's southward journey. Other cultivators may be worried about the rumor of the underworld invasion. According to your temperament, you should not come. Do you want Elder Qishan to guide you? But you are now a divine talisman master who knows the knowing destiny state. You should know your own destiny. Why do you need someone to help you?" As soon as he said this, he immediately knew that he had made a big mistake. The calligraphy addict naturally did not need Elder Qishan to help her with questions about cultivation or talisman Taoism. She did not even need to ask about life. So naturally she asked. No matter how great Mo Shanshan was, she was still a girl. After hearing these 2 questions from Ning Ke, she could not help but feel a little embarrassed and annoyed. She looked at him and asked, "Then why are you here? Do you want to steal the Buddhist scriptures of the Lank Temple?" Ning Ke knew that he had made a mistake, so he did not dare to mock her back. He said honestly, "The Academy always needs people to show respect to the grand meeting of the cultivation world. I represent the Academy to enter the human realm, so I have to come." Then he looked a little sad and said, "More importantly, my Songsong's illness has acted up again. This time, even the teacher can't do anything about it. But the teacher said that the Lank Temple can cure it, so I brought her here." During the journey in the wilderness, especially during the time when they continued to the north, Mo Shanshan and Ning Ke had been traveling together. Naturally, they talked about a lot of people and things around them. She talked about her fellow disciples in the Black Ink Garden, while Ning Ke talked about his fellow disciples in the academy and his comrades in the city of Wei. But most of the time, he talked about his little handmaiden at home. Naturally, he also talked about their childhood and the little handmaiden's old illness. Mo Shanshan had heard the words, "my Sang-Sang," countless times from Ning Quebec. She had also read the chicken soup calligraphy, so she knew how important Sang-Sang was to him even before Ning Ke himself. So even though she had only met Sang-Sang twice, and had not spoken more than 10 sentences, she was actually very familiar with Sang-Sang. She even felt a sense of closeness to Sang-Sang, except for a certain person and some things. Hearing that Sang-Sang was seriously ill, she looked at the black horse carriage not far away and was very worried. But she did not say anything. Ning Ke could see that her worry was sincere. He felt a warmth in his heart and then a sense of guilt. He was capable but not virtuous, but he could be loved by such a beautiful and kind woman. What a ridiculous thing! What's going on over there? He looked at the crowd under the big tree and pointed at the stone chess and the yellow-robed old monk who was playing chess. Mo Shanshan did not expect that he would not know the rules of the cultivation world for many years, even though he had already entered the Tile Mountain. She explained, "Being able to get an answer from Master Qishan is something that cultivators look forward to the most. So every time the master comes out of the hut, many cultivators, especially those who are not from the wild, will come to the Tile Mountain. After all, this is a quiet place for Buddhism. It can't become as noisy as a market. Moreover, the master can't choose a fated person from thousands of people. So, since many years ago, the Lank Temple has set a rule that only cultivators who pass the 3 chess games will be qualified to be chosen by Master Qishan before they reach the cave. Ning-Ke looked at the big tree and frowned. For example, we have to win against that old monk to cross the bridge? Emo Shanshan nodded and said, sitting and talking in the Tile Mountain is a very famous event in the cultivation world. It is said that one of the 3 chess games is an incomplete game, one is a real game, and the last is a temporary game. Ning-Ke asked, do we have to win 3 games in a row to reach the hut? Emo Shanshan said, the last time Master Qishan opened the hut to choose a fated person was decades ago. I am not very clear about the details, but the master is an eminent monk of the Buddhism sect. I think he will not just decide based on winning or losing. If the visitor can show his wisdom or other meaningful qualities during the game, he will be chosen by the master. But the 3 games must be played. Ning-Ke asked why. Emo Shanshan did not explain. Because it is a rule. Ning-Ke shook his head and said, rules are dead, but people are alive. He said it seriously, but Emo Shanshan laughed and said, you can't play chess? Ning-Ke was a little embarrassed and said, I am willing to fight with swords. I don't like to waste my energy on chess. Emo Shanshan said with a little worry, then what will you do? Ning-Ke said with a smile, what else can I do? No one will dare to stop me. But, if these monks are really stupid enough to go against the academy, you have to help me. Emo Shanshan looked at his playful appearance. This time, she finally saw the hidden determination and ruthlessness in his eyes. She couldn't help but feel a little sour in her heart. Then, it softened. She knew that since this matter was related to Song Song's life, no matter what difficulties and obstacles there were, even if it was Haotian in front of him, Ning-Ke would cut through them. This really made her very jealous. She really liked this. It is a little late, but I wrote a lot more in this chapter. It is almost 5,000 words. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian.com to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 552. The cultivators under the big tree had been paying attention to the young man and woman by the stream. They knew very well that although the calligraphy addict had a gentle temperament, she rarely paid any attention to men. At this time, seeing that she was talking happily with the young man, they could not help but whisper, guessing the identity and origin of the young man. Some of them had vaguely guessed Ning-Ke's identity. The scene in front of them confirmed their guess. The shock in their hearts turned into respect and fear. They did not know if they should greet the legendary sublime being of the academy. Instead, they should remain silent to avoid upsetting him. The nobleman from the South Jin Kingdom sensed the change in the atmosphere. The rogue cultivators who surrounded him to please him were uneasy. He glanced at the 2 figures by the stream and his face darkened. He was of noble status, but he had personally come to the Lank Temple to attend the Yulan Hungry Ghost Festival. Other than representing the royal family of the South Jin Kingdom to show respect to Master Qishan, the South Jin Kingdom's benefactor, the more important reason was that he knew the calligraphy addict would come. He wanted to show his sincerity through this. He even secretly hoped that if he could get Master Qishan's promise to solve his doubts, he might be able to have a happy ending with the woman in Hua Mountain. The royal family of the South Jin Kingdom had privately tested the calligraphy addict's feelings, but they were rejected. The nobleman's several letters had gone unanswered. Only then did he realize that Emo Shanshan was not an ordinary woman. After entering Hua Mountain today, he had suppressed his desire to be close to her in order not to make her feel unhappy that he was pestering her. He pretended to be calm and wanted to leave a good impression on her. As the nobleman shook his shoulders and chatted with the cultivators in a reserved and gentle manner, he nervously guessed that Emo Shanshan would be watching him quietly with admiration in her eyes. He thought that he had succeeded, but he suddenly realized that the woman he admired did not care about him at all. Instead, she went to the stream to whisper with a man who had appeared out of nowhere. She was laughing so happily. The surprised gazes and whispered guesses of the cultivators under the tree attracted Ning Kei's attention. It could not escape his keen senses, especially the gloomy face of the young master from the South Jin Kingdom whom he had met in the Lank Temple yesterday morning. He could not help but frown slightly. Thinking of certain things, he had to admit that if he did not consider character and morality, and only based on his family background, the young master from the South Jin Kingdom was probably the most suitable partner for the calligraphy addict in the world. As for character and morality, he himself did not have those qualities. Thinking of this, he felt inexplicably unhappy. Ning Kei looked at the nobleman from the South Jin Kingdom and asked, "Did you come with that person?" Emo Shanshan shook her head. Somehow, after confirming that she did not come to the Lank Temple with the nobleman from the South Jin Kingdom, Ning Kei's displeasure disappeared. He smiled and said, "But he must have followed you here." Emo Shanshan did not know why he would say that. A chilly autumn wind rose from the bottom of the stream and blew along the stone platform. There was a rustling sound in the big green tree. However, the branches and leaves in the canopy were too thick and there were no gaps in the wind. The South Jin nobleman's robe was lifted by the wind and his bright yellow belt was suddenly hidden. "I know he is the crown prince of the South Jin Kingdom," Ning Kei said. Emo Shanshan was slightly surprised. Ning Kei smiled and said, "We met in the Lank Temple yesterday. We had a small argument, but you know that I am more gentle now. Even if he asked me what I am, I did not tell him. In my eyes, he is not even a thing. Because I have dealt with him much earlier. He once wanted to buy my chicken soup calligraphy to please you. That time, I really slapped him until his face was red and swollen. Now I have no interest in slapping him again." Emo Shanshan looked at the mountain stream under the cliff and lowered her head with a smile. Ning Kei thought that she did not know what happened at the auction where the old brush pen shop was stolen, so he told her about it and said happily, "Mr. 13 did not give face to the crown prince of the South Jin Kingdom. Instead, he gave him this loud slap." Emo Shanshan looked up and asked with a smile, "Are you very proud?" Ning Kei thought for a moment and said, "I did feel very proud at that time. Now that I think about it, I am still a little proud." "Then you are really proud." Emo Shanshan nodded and said, "Actually, I know about this." Ning Kei thought that since she knew about it, it was really awkward for him to tell her about it with a smile. Emo Shanshan looked into his eyes and said with a faint smile, "Should I thank you for helping me chase away one of my suitors? Or are you just proud of making me yearn for you and live alone for the rest of my life?" Ning Kei's body stiffened slightly, and he did not know how to reply. "The most troublesome thing is that everyone in the world knows about this. Then, how do you think the world will look at me, and how will they look at the way you look at me?" Emo Shanshan said shyly, "Since it's not feasible, it's not appropriate for you to be like this. I was wrong, I was really wrong. I shouldn't have done that at that time." Ning Kei turned sideways and bowed deeply to her. He apologized. "I have been making mistakes since then. I hope you can forgive me." His apology was very sincere, a rare sincerity. However, Emo Shanshan was not happy. Her clear eyes rippled slightly, and she was a little disappointed and sour. She forced a smile and said, "Tao Addict is right. You are the most shameless person in the world. You admit your mistakes faster than anyone else. You are so sincere that you always make people feel that others are wrong and you are the innocent one." Ning Kei was silent. Only then did he realize that no matter how elegant and refined a woman was, once she was troubled by something, she was no different from any other woman in the world. She would always find countless reasons to be angry. Of course, he knew that he could only accept it because he was indeed wrong. After thinking for a while, he said seriously, "In order to make my apology more sincere, I have decided to do one thing." Emo Shanshan asked, What is it? Ning-Ke said with a smile. After Sang-Sang recovers, I will rush back to Chang, and as fast as possible, and then go to Grand Secretary Wang's mansion to get the chicken soup calligraphy back. I will then send it to you. Emo Shanshan said with a smile. There are already many of your calligraphy pieces in the study beside the ink lake. Ning-Ke felt a little helpless and asked, Then what can I do to make you happy? Emo Shanshan looked into his eyes and said, There are no notes you wrote to me in the study beside the ink lake. This was a request that had been repeated many times. She felt that she had belittled herself and was ashamed. Her cheeks gradually turned red, but she still looked into his eyes bravely and firmly. Ning-Ke did not dare to look into her eyes. He looked at the mountain stream in front of him and remained silent. Emo Shanshan sighed in her heart and said nothing more. She looked at the mountain stream calmly and silently. The mountain scenery was extremely beautiful in autumn. The mountain stream was quiet and there was a faint sound of water. There was no sound by the stream. The speculations of the cultivators under the big tree all pointed to the same person. This riddle was indeed very simple. The calligraphy addict had been around for many years. In all the stories she had left behind, there was only one man who could stand side by side with her and watch the mountain scenery without saying a word. As the person who had already guessed Ning-Ke's identity spoke, the speculation became reality. People were sure that the man standing beside the calligraphy addict was the legendary Mr. 13 of the Academy, Ning-Ke. Soft gasps of shock sounded in the crowd. No matter how hard they tried to suppress it, they could not control their reactions. Looking at the two figures by the stream, the crown prince of the South Jin Kingdom's face was livid. His hands that were exposed outside his sleeves trembled with anger and jealousy. No matter how much he wanted to maintain his poise, he could not control his emotions. After a moment of silence, someone finally could not help but walk towards the stream. With someone taking the lead, naturally more people followed. In an extremely short period of time, the big tree became empty. The previously crowded stone chessboard suddenly became extremely quiet. The South Jin Kingdom player, who was sitting on one side of the chessboard, was deep in thought and did not notice. However, the yellow-robed old monk from the Lank Temple, who was in charge of judging the endgame, noticed it. He raised his head in surprise and glanced at the stream. When the cultivator under the tree took the first step, Ning-Ke felt it. He turned around and saw dozens of cultivators walking towards him. He could not help but be stunned. He quickly calculated how he and Mo Shanshan should deal with these people when they rushed over so that they would not be pushed down the mountain stream. Then, he glanced at the black horse carriage and confirmed that the big black horse was on guard. Only then did he relax. The cultivators did not really push Ning-Ke down the mountain stream. Instead, they acted with propriety. It could even be said that they had a natural sense of awe. When they were still several feet away from the stream, they stopped at the same time. Taoist Li from the Kingdom of Song greets Mr. 13. Junior Lin Ruoyu greets seniors from the Academy. I am Hua Yin greets Sir Ning on behalf of my teacher. Everyone bowed to Ning-Ke respectfully. Some were reserved, some were excited. Some were trembling, and some were so excited that their tones changed. It could be felt that everyone was very excited. This was the world of Haotian. Haotian Taoism naturally had a supreme position in the cultivation world. Most of the cultivators who came to the Hua Mountain behind the Lank Temple today were also cultivators. However, the subtle confrontation between Haotian Taoism and the Academy happened in the dark shadows of history. It happened between the truly powerful cultivators who could summon wind and rain. It had nothing to do with these ordinary cultivators. They only knew that the back of the mountain of the Academy was the legendary unknown place. The core disciples of the headmaster of the Academy in the back of the mountain were the legendary unworldly sublime beings. To the cultivators of the world, the so-called unworldly sublime beings always walked in the cloud. They occasionally appeared in the mortal world, but it was difficult to find them. Most cultivators would never have the chance to meet these true unworldly sublime beings. Even among all the unknown places, the Academy was the only place connected to the mortal world. However, cultivators outside of the Tang Empire basically had no chance to meet the disciples of the back of the mountain of the Academy. Today they finally saw them. They were not watching the unworldly sublime beings fly across the sky on their swords. They were so close to them that they could even speak to them. How could they not be excited? Regardless of whether this lucky chance would bring them any benefits on the long road of cultivation, at least they could recall the story of 1 year in the Lank Temple on the Hua Mountain to their juniors and disciples before they returned to the glory of Haotian in the future. They could proudly and contentedly talk about how approachable Mr. 13 of the Academy was at that time. Ning Ke never felt that he was an unworldly sublime being. After he finally succeeded in entering the second floor of the Academy, he still went to the House of Red Sleeves to drink and chat with his neighbors on the Lin 47th Street. He brought the students from the front yard out to the north to the frontier fortress. He did not know how many people in the world had interacted with him. Although he clearly felt that the world's attitude towards him had gradually changed over the years, he did not care much because he still lived in the world and did not live in seclusion. This had something to do with him being the one who entered the human realm from the Academy, but it was also because of his own experience and temperament. If he really wanted to enter the human realm, he would have to cut ties with the world. However, before he succeeded in his revenge, he could not tear away the inextricable ties between himself and the mortal world. Even if he killed Xiahou, this situation did not seem to change much. Therefore, looking at the respectful and even reverent expressions of these foreign cultivators and the excitement in their eyes, Ning Ke was stunned for a moment before he came to his senses. He showed a gentle smile and calmly returned the greeting to these cultivators. Although his expression was calm, his heart was not. He had always been very clear about the status of the Academy in the cultivation world. However, when he entered the human realm in the past, the people he dealt with were either lunatics or terrifyingly powerful seniors. Therefore, it was not until this moment that he truly felt the power of the Academy and the respect or reverence that cultivators had for the Academy. Whether it was respect or reverence, it was a very good feeling. Although this was the world of Haotian and there were many cultivators, the Tang Empire was, after all, the strongest country in the world. Naturally, there were also cultivation sects that were deeply influenced by the Tang Empire and thought that they were close to the Academy. A sword master from the Great River Kingdom did not hesitate to call himself a junior disciple of the same sect. He knelt in front of Ning Ke and bowed deeply. Then, he stood up and consciously stood next to Mo Shanshan, a proud expression on his face. This behavior was naturally a little ridiculous, but most cultivators did not laugh. They felt that it was natural. If they were also cultivators from the Great River Kingdom, they would probably kneel even faster than that person. Although the calligraphy addict was charming, who would not want to ride on her coattails? Moreover, they could be close to the sublime being of the Academy as a member of her family. However, in the end, there was still someone who could not stand it and let out a sneer, instantly breaking the atmosphere by the mountain stream. The cultivators who were still bowing in a mess looked back in shock, wondering who was so bold. The person who dared to laugh at this moment was naturally not afraid of the Academy. The West Hill Divine Palace did not send anyone here today, and the monks from the Lank Temple were still at the foot of the mountain for some reason. The only people present who were qualified to confront the Academy, or rather, thought that they were qualified to confront the Academy, were the disciples of the Sword Garret of South Jin Kingdom. Ever since the Sage of Sword Lu Bai appeared and was recognized by the cultivation world as the strongest in the world, the South Jin Kingdom, which thought that it was the second strongest country in the world, became increasingly arrogant. Sometimes they even looked down on the Tang Empire. As for the disciples of the Sword Garret who were under Lu Bai, They were often known for their arrogance when they walked in the cultivation world. However, people guessed wrong. Even the disciples of the sword Garrett did not dare to show any disrespect to the people from the academy. Even if they hated the academy because of Lu Yiqing's tragic death, their hatred was a hatred of respect. The person who laughed was indeed from the South Jin Kingdom. However, he was not a disciple of the sword Garrett. He was the crown prince of the South Jin Kingdom. After confirming Ning Kei's identity, the crown prince of the South Jin Kingdom started to get angry. His eyes were filled with hatred because of jealousy. Although he knew what the academy meant to the Tang Empire, and even he should not provoke them, he could not stand it anymore when he saw the cultivators acting so servile in front of Ning Quebec. The crowd gradually parted, and the crown prince of the South Jin Kingdom walked out. Looking at Mo Shanshan's figure, his expression became slightly better. He said in a low voice, "How can such a fickle person be qualified to stand beside you, Hill Master? The chess master I brought is a national player in the palace. He is about to solve the chess game. You can come with us to the mountain later." It was dead silent by the mountain stream. The cultivators had complicated expressions on their faces. Many wanted to laugh, but did not dare to. As a result, their expressions were especially strange and interesting. In the past few years, the most famous love story in the world was no longer the innocent childhood sweetheart story between the flower addict of the Yueluan Kingdom and Prince Longqing. Instead, it was the melodramatic love triangle story between the Academy's Ning Kei, the calligraphy addict of the Great River Kingdom, and the little handmaiden Sang Sang. This story had long spread throughout the countries and was deeply rooted in people's hearts. In the beginning, Sang Sang's image in the story was very faint. No one knew who the little handmaiden was, and they could not understand why Ning Kei insisted on choosing her instead of making the calligraphy addict sad and disappointed. As a result, everyone began to feel indignant for the calligraphy addict. However, as time passed, many secrets were no longer secret. The cultivation world finally knew that the little handmaiden Sang Sang was the only successor of the former great divine priest of light. Especially when the West Hill Divine Palace officially announced the title of Lady of Light a few months ago, the situation immediately changed. At least in the eyes of the people, the little handmaiden Sang Sang finally had an equal position with the calligraphy addict in the story. As a result, the story became even more interesting. As the crown prince of the South Jin Kingdom criticized in a low voice, the cultivators present remembered this famous love story. Naturally, they also remembered the rumor that the Lady of Light would always be by Ning Kei's side. Only then did they remember that there was a black horse carriage by the stone platform. The crowd turned to look at the black horse carriage. Their gazes became different. They were even more reserved than when they looked at Ning Quebec. The fear in their eyes was clearly much stronger. Someone was the first to come to his senses. He hurried to the black horse carriage and knelt down. Just like what was said before, the cultivators all respected the West Hill Divine Palace. It was the same beside the mountain stream. The cultivators hurried to the black horse carriage and knelt down on the ground. The crowd worshipped devoutly. "Welcome, Lady of Light, to the kingdom of the human world." Sang Sang's calm voice came from the horse carriage. "Rise." Ning Kei smiled. He did not expect the girl's voice to be so reserved and dignified. The cultivators all stood up as if relieved of a heavy burden. They still maintained their respectful posture. Even though their knees were covered in grass and dust, no one dared to pat them. Looking at this scene, the South Jin Kingdom prince's expression grew uglier. He only then realized that even the people around Ning Kei were of a higher status than him. If the little handmaiden in the horse carriage became the great divine priest of light in the future, wouldn't her status be even higher than his father's? He did not expect that what would happen next would make him even angrier and more helpless. Sang Sang's voice came from the horse carriage again. "Miss Calligraphy Addict, are you willing to accompany me up the mountain?" The South Jin Kingdom prince's expression suddenly changed. The cultivator's expressions suddenly became extremely interesting. Ning Kei's heart suddenly tightened. He knew Sang Sang very well. He knew that Sang Sang had addressed Emo Shanshan as the Hill Master, and now she addressed her as Miss Calligraphy Addict. What was the meaning behind these words? Although there was no malice, he did not know if it would make the other girl unhappy. Emo Shanshan was not unhappy, but her smile was a little bitter. She vaguely guessed why Sang Sang had asked her to board the horse carriage. It was probably because of what the South Jin Kingdom Crown Prince had said earlier. The South Jin Kingdom Crown Prince had said that Ning Kei was a fickle person. Sang Sang wanted to prove that this had nothing to do with Ning Quebec. This was their business. The South Jin Kingdom Crown Prince invited the calligraphy addict up the mountain. Sang Sang then invited the calligraphy addict up the mountain. At the same time, she invited the calligraphy addict to slap the South Jin Crown Prince's face. In order to help her young master vent his anger, and to maintain his imposing manner and glory in front of the cultivators in the world, Sang Sang was willing to do many things, including this invitation that she did not like. Emo Shanshan sighed softly. She thought that it was unimaginable for Sang Sang to think about Ning Kei all the time and to make Ning Kei happy even if she had to sacrifice herself. If it were her, would she be able to do it? It only took a moment for her to think. Sang Sang had already done so much for Ning Kei's sake. Emo Shanshan thought to herself, so what if I took the initiative to take a step towards the black horse carriage? Everyone watched as the calligraphy addict entered the black horse carriage. Then, they looked at Ning Kei with different gazes. Apart from respect, there was also a lot of envy. Ning Kei knew that this was not the truth. It did not mean anything that the two girls were in the same horse carriage. However, he naturally would not explain anything. He walked to the front of the carriage and patted the big black horse lightly to signal for it to set off. The black horse carriage slowly moved. Ning Kei sat on the cushion in front of the carriage and looked at the South Jin Crown Prince's gloomy and ugly face. He suddenly felt a little happy, but it was not enough. Because the purpose of this trip was to treat Sang Sang's illness, he did not want to cause any more trouble. That was why he was indifferent to the verbal conflict they had in the Lank Temple yesterday morning, or the Crown Prince's mockery and criticism. It was completely unlike his usual low-key silence. However, he would still be unhappy in the end. When the black horse carriage passed by the South Jin Crown Prince, it suddenly stopped. Ning Kei looked at the ugly expression on the South Jin Crown Prince's face and sighed. Wrinkling the spring water. Just as he finished speaking, someone laughed. Even the cultivators who were afraid of the South Jin Kingdom did not laugh, but they were also winking. After all, this was someone else's matter. The Lady of Light had let the calligraphy addict into the horse carriage. Even if you were the noble South Jin Crown Prince, what right do you have to interfere? You like the calligraphy addict, but she does not like you. You want to stir up the relationship between the calligraphy addict and Mr. 13 of the Academy, but the Lady of Light did not say anything. What right do you have to do so? This was really like ruffling a pond of spring water. What did it have to do with you? The South Jin Crown Prince's entourage and the disciples of the Sword Garret would not laugh, but they were not angry either. Instead, they lowered their heads in shame. To them, the Crown Prince had brought this upon himself. The black horse carriage moved again and slowly passed by the South Jin Crown Prince. Then, Ning Kei's unfinished sentence sounded. None of your damn business. The South Jin Crown Prince was already trembling with anger. When he heard this vulgar word, his vision darkened and he almost fainted. Ning Kei lifted the curtains and saw that Sang Sang looked well, so he was not worried. However, he was extremely worried when he saw her and Shanshan sitting opposite each other in silence. He comforted himself and kicked the big black horse's rump, signaling for it to hurry up. However, the black horse carriage was stopped in front of the jumping tiger stream before it could cross the bridge. It was not the South Jin Crown Prince who stopped the carriage, but a very cold sentence. Even the disciples of the academy have to follow the rules. Is this how the headmaster of the academy teaches his students? The yellow-robed old monk beside the stone puppet under the big tree slowly raised his head and said in a slow voice. The black horse carriage stopped in front of the bridge. Ning Ke was silent for a moment. He did not like to hear such old-fashioned words, especially when they used their teacher to pressure him. However, because Sang Sang needed help from the Lank Temple, he did not show his disgust. He looked at the old monk and asked, "What rules?" The yellow-robed old monk slowly stood up and said, "You can only cross the bridge after you solve the game." Ning Ke shook his head and said, "Rules are dead, but people are alive." He had said this to the calligraphy addict earlier. However, the yellow-robed old monk said, "People are alive only when they stick to the rules." There was a certain philosophy in this sentence. Ning Ke did not know if the old monk knew that his real purpose of bringing Sang Sang into the mountain was to cure her illness, so he used this sentence to threaten him. He frowned slightly and said, "Do you want my teacher to solve the game before you can see Master Qishan?" The yellow-robed old monk's expression did not change. He said, "If the headmaster of the academy came personally, senior brother Qishan would have come to welcome him. However, the headmaster of the academy can ignore all the rules in the world, but you, as his disciple, do not have the right to do so." Ning Ke looked at the old monk's eyes and suddenly said, "The Buddhism sect emphasizes that all beings are equal. Humans, pigs and dogs are the same. Even if the difference between my teacher and me is like that between a stupid pig and a human, I am still equal to my teacher. If my teacher doesn't follow the rules, why should I?" The yellow-robed old monk said indifferently, "The academy's disciples are indeed good at arguing. It's just that I don't want to listen when I don't want to." Ning Ke said, "So in the end it still comes down to who has the stronger fist. The rules of your temple can only stop those who do not have the ability to break the rules." The yellow-robed old monk frowned slightly and said, "Does Mr. 13 think that you have the ability to surpass the rules of the world?" Ning Ke said, "I want to try." After saying this, he reached into the horse carriage. Sang Sang had already opened the arrow box and assembled the iron bow. Ning Ke took the iron bow, knocked an arrow, and pointed it at the yellow-robed old monk. Then he said, "Do you want to try?" "I worked on it for half a day in the afternoon, but I still could not finish it. I hired a craftsman and finally finished it very late. Then I disconnected the internet and started writing. I was so excited that I forgot the time. This chapter has 7,000 words, and there are still 5,000 left today. Keep up the good work. Please support me for monthly votes and recommendation vote. I really need some stimulation now. Thank you." To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidien.com to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 553. Ning Ke's movement of taking the iron bow was very natural, and so was his movement of knocking the arrow. His expression was very calm, as if he was eating with chopsticks. However, when he pulled the iron bow and aimed the dark and cold arrowhead at the yellow-robed old monk by the stone table under the green tree, the quiet mountain stream was suddenly enveloped by a piercingly cold, killing intent. Looking at this scene, the yellow-garbed old monk's wrinkled face turned pale. It was not from fear, but from extreme anger and confusion. Even his monk robes began to tremble. The old monk naturally knew of Ning Ke's primordial 13 arrows that shocked the cultivation world. The once powerful and perfect Prince Long Qing had been shot by Ning Ke with one arrow. As a senior monk living in seclusion in the Lank Temple, the old monk had never thought that his attempt to stop Ning Ke from maintaining the rules of the Hua Mountain would result in such a strong murderous aura from Ning Quebec. What made the old monk even angrier and more confused was that Ning Ke's calm expression as he knocked the arrow. If he really tried to stop Ning Ke, he was afraid that Ning Ke would really shoot at him. How dare he do this? The cultivators were respectfully watching the black horse carriage leave, and naturally saw this scene. Like the yellow-garbed old monk, they were shocked speechless. They did not understand why Ninkei would do this. Those who paid a visit to Master Chishan had to follow the rules of the Lank Temple. There had been no exceptions for decades, even for the Divine Lord Lotus. Even if you were a core disciple of the headmaster of the academy and felt that accepting such a test would damage the reputation of the academy, it was fine if you wanted to force your way through. But why did you have to kill? Some of the older cultivators suddenly thought of some old events in the cultivation world. They thought of Mr. Ku, who had caused countless bloodshed in the world, and then remembered that Ninkei was like Mr. Ku back then. They were both disciples of the academy who had entered the human realm. They could not help but feel terrified and did not dare to look at the black horse carriage again. The sharp iron arrowhead glowed with a faint cold light, but it didn't shake at all, as if all the light was contained in the arrowhead. This could only mean that the iron arrow didn't even tremble in the slightest, that the hand holding the arrowhead was terrifyingly steady, and that the person preparing to shoot the arrow was extremely indifferent. The yellow-clothed old monk looked at the iron arrow and knew that his blood would splatter in the next moment. This was because he was already old, and the arrow was too close. There was no way for him to avoid it. A hint of fear flashed across his aged face, and then it turned into anger, and then into pain. This was the pain of many years, and then it all turned into calmness and resolution. He is indeed the one who entered the human realm from the academy. The yellow-clothed old monk looked at Ninkei and said indifferently, "You are indeed like Ku Haoren. However, I still have to abide by the rules because this world needs rules. People like you and Ku Haoren who don't want to abide by the rules can kill me, but they can't intimidate me. I don't know what painful memories youngest uncle left for you back then, but as a disciple of the academy, I have to say that youngest uncle has never been a cold-blooded person." Ninkei looked at the yellow-clothed old monk and said, "It's just that when people who don't abide by the rules meet people like you who uphold the rules, someone has to give way. For example, right now, I just need you to give way." The yellow-clothed old monk said coldly, "Why is it always us who abide by the rules who give way?" Ninkei said, "Before answering this question, I think we have to first understand why you set these rules for others to abide by, and why others must abide by the rules you set. In fact, you know very well that rules are only made by the strong to restrict or exploit the weak. What I admire most about youngest uncle is that he became a strong person who can ignore any rules, but he never thought of setting rules for others." The yellow-clothed old monk suddenly laughed and looked at Ninquebek. He said sternly, "How can there be anyone in the world who can ignore any rules? Ku Haoren was finally punished by heaven, and that is a warning to you now." Hearing this, Ninkei's expression did not change, but he slowly raised his eyebrows. The disciples of the back of the mountain of the academy naturally respected the headmaster the most, but their idol would always be the youngest uncle who rode a little black donkey and carried a sword everywhere, but died young. If they heard someone disrespecting the headmaster of the academy, the disciples in the back of the mountain might even smile and not care. That was because the headmaster of the academy was a very interesting elder who could be teased. Moreover, the headmaster of the academy was still alive and well. If he was really angry, he could destroy that sect or small country himself. But if they heard someone disrespecting the youngest uncle, the disciples of the back of the mountain might really fight them to the death, because the black donkey was dead, and the youngest uncle was also gone. He could no longer use his sword to speak for himself. Ninkei was the person who dared to kill the most in the world, but because of Song Song's illness, he had been silent ever since he came to the Hua Mountain. He did not want to kill people at will, which would affect Song Song's treatment. At this moment, he did not want to endure any more. The bowstring gradually tightened between his fingers, making a slight squeaking sound, which meant that if this arrow was shot, someone would definitely die. I didn't sense anyone warning me from the dark. He looked at the yellow-garbed old monk and said, but I am clearly warning you now that my horse carriage will go on the bridge and across the stream in a moment. If you try to stop me, I will kill you. If he wanted to kill, he would kill. If he wanted to kill, he would kill. On the field by the stream, everyone looked at Ning Kei's calm expression, and no one doubted his determination and ability. Qing Ziqing, the powerhouse from the Sword Garret of South Jin Kingdom, who had been silent, could not help but sigh in his heart when he saw the tense atmosphere. He took 2 steps forward, wanting to stop Ning Quebec. But he only took 1 step and stopped, because he was shocked to find that even he could not break Ning Kei's indomitable arrow momentum at this time. The black horse carriage slowly moved towards the bridge. The yellow-garbed old monk slowly stood up, his expression calm and determined, ready to die. Who could stop this? At this moment, a crisp sound of a copper bell suddenly rang on the mountain path. The bell was crisp but not cold, and there was a gentle and compassionate aura hidden within it. Several kingfishers heard the bell and flew out of the bamboo. They landed on the mountain path and hopped towards the source of the bell, looking like devout believers worshipping the mountain. An old voice rang out. The voice was extremely sharp and full of resentment. It should have come from the mouth of an old woman. It disharmoniously broke the Buddhist realm between the mountains. The leaping kingfishers on the mountain path stopped in bewilderment. Ning Kei, you are still so cold-blooded and domineering. Is this how the Tangs do things? But don't forget, this is the Lank Temple. Do you really think that no one in the cultivation world dares to resist the tyranny of the Academy? After a while, another deep voice came from below the mountain path. The voice sounded like the bell of the ancient temple, and also like the singing of Buddha. The disappointed kingfishers on the mountain path began to jump with joy again. This is a quiet place for Buddhism. Even if you are from the Academy, how can you say that you will kill people? There are still 3,000 words left. Continue to write carefully. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Qidien.com to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 554. The sound of the copper bell was crisp and sweet. It could clear one's heart. Kingfishers hopped on the road to welcome the people coming down from Hua Mountain. There were more than 10 sadhus from Yueluan Kingdom, wearing bamboo hats and holding iron staff. The old woman with wrinkles and a mean expression was naturally Aunt Kuni Mati, who had a high status in the Buddhism sect. She was still as beautiful as a flower, but obviously looked more haggard. Lu Qinjiao, the flower addict, walked silently beside her. The most eye-catching thing was the light chariot in the middle of the crowd. The curtains on the chariot were embroidered with Buddhist mantras and painted with beautiful pictures of Buddhist stories. It looked extremely solemn and beautiful. No one knew who was sitting in the Buddhist chariot, but the abbot of Lank Temple and the last disciple of Elder Qishan, Monk Guan Hai, were standing respectfully by the side. Looking at the black horse carriage beside Jumping Tiger Stream and Ning Kei, who was holding the iron bow, Kuni Mati's right hand, which was holding the walking stick, had blue veins popped out. She did not know what kind of pain he had caused her. She looked old, and the hatred in her eyes grew stronger. Lu Qinjiao, on the other hand, looked indifferent, as if she did not see Ning Kei at all. Looking at the people coming up from the mountain path, Ning Kei thought that if it was just Kuni Mati and the flower addict, Monk Guan Hai would not have to leave his wife behind to welcome them personally. So his gaze fell on the Buddhist chariot, and he guessed that the monk in the chariot was not an ordinary person. He might even be from Xiankong Temple. When the cultivators saw that it was Aunt Kuni Mati and the flower addict, they all bowed and greeted them. At the same time, like Ning Kei, they guessed the identity of the person in the Buddhist chariot. How dare he speak to the disciples of the Academy in a lecturing tone? Kuni Mati nodded indifferently, returning the greeting. She was one of the most senior people in the cultivation world, and she had earned her reputation because of her age. Naturally, she did not need to exchange pleasantries with these juniors. Moreover, her attention was always on Ning Quebec. If the hatred in her eyes could turn into flying knives, Ning Ke would have already been pierced by her eyes and bleeding profusely. The flower addict, Lu Qinjia, remained indifferent and silent. No matter how respectful the cultivators were, she did not respond. It was as if the world around her did not exist. Seeing that Ning Ke was still aiming at the yellow-robed old monk, the deep and majestic voice came from the Buddhist chariot again. It sounded extremely strict. Soldiers are inauspicious. Put it down now. After a moment of silence, Ning Ke loosened the tight bowstring and moved the arrowhead slightly. No longer being targeted by the iron arrow, the yellow-clothed old monk suddenly felt that the piercingly cold, killing intent that had enveloped him had disappeared without a trace. Only then did he realize that his monk robe was already wet with sweat. Only then did he understand his previous fear, and could not help but smile bitterly. Seeing this scene, the cultivators who were still nervous immediately heaved a sigh of relief. Cuny Matty looked at Ning Ke and said in a hoarse voice, "The Academy only knows how to bully the weak." Suddenly, her resentful and mocking voice came to an abrupt halt. Because the iron arrow in Ning Ke's hand was aimed at the Buddhist chariot. In Cuny Matty's view, the eminent monk in the Buddhist chariot would definitely be able to shock the Academy. She had wanted to take this opportunity to humiliate Ning Ke, but she did not expect Ning Ke to be so tough. She scolded sternly, "Ning Ke, how dare you?" From hearing the crisp copper bell coming from the mountain path and the deep Buddhist voice, Ning Ke knew that a real sublime being from the Buddhism sect had arrived. He even vaguely guessed the person's origin. But so what? Of course the Academy likes to bully the weak. But in fact, we prefer to smash the seemingly hardest things, whether it's the rules or those who like to put on airs. Ning Ke aimed the iron arrow at the shadow of the monk in the Buddhist chariot and said, "There are so many people by the stream today. It seems that the master has the highest state and the toughest means. I wonder if you dare to take an arrow from me." The bowstring was tightened again and the iron arrow was ready to be shot again. However, this time when Ning Ke pulled the bow, it was completely different from when he had aimed at the yellow-robed old monk. An extremely powerful aura was slowly released from his body. The kingfishers, who were jumping happily under the Buddhist chariot and intoxicated by the benevolent aura of the eminent monk in the chariot, sensed this powerful and cold aura. They uttered a few frightened cries and flapped their wings, flying into the green bamboo and disappearing. The autumn wind gradually blew and the big green tree swayed restlessly. The dense branches and leaves rustled and were affected by the aura of the iron arrow in Ning Ke's hand. Hundreds of green leaves fell around the black horse carriage. As this powerful aura appeared on Ning Ke, the cultivators with high states on the hill suddenly changed their expressions. Ching Ziqing, the powerhouse from the Sword Garret, who was in the knowing destiny state, had the strongest reaction. His slender hands moved randomly and unconsciously. Stimulated by this aura, he held the air in a semicircle and had a strong impulse to unsheathe his sword. Cuny Matty's expression became extremely ugly. She had vaguely guessed something, but she could not believe that Ning Ke, whom she hated the most, had such a lucky chance. Monk Guan Hai knew Ning Ke's temperament and said in shock, "Senior Brother 13, quickly put down the arrow. The master is the president of the commandment yard of the Xiankong Temple. You must not act rashly." With these words there was an uproar. Everyone was extremely shocked and could not believe what they had heard. The unknown place was a legend in the cultivation world. It was extremely difficult for ordinary cultivators to see them. But today, in the Hua Mountain, they had seen the disciples of the back of the mountain of the Academy and then people from the Xiankong Temple. It was really unbelievable. If the Academy was said to be a place connecting the two worlds, and everyone knew that it was located in the south of Chang'an City, they would occasionally have the opportunity to see the unworldly sublime beings in the back of the mountain. However, the Jishou Abbey of the Haotian Taoism sect and the Xiankong Temple of the Buddhism sect had only appeared in the classics and rumors. Basically, no one had seen them. Everyone looked at the Buddhist chariot and thought in shock. Could it really be the eminent monks of the Xiankong Temple behind the curtain? Would the Yulan hungry ghost meeting of the Lank Temple attract so many unworldly sublime beings? It was natural for people to be excited. However, at this time, no one walked to the Buddhist chariot to greet Ning Ke like they did before, because the Buddhist chariot was being aimed at by an iron arrow. Hearing Monk Guan Hai's words, Ning Ke's expression did not change at all. His left hand that was holding the iron bow was as steady as the 1,000-year mountain stream. He calmly and attentively waited for the person in the Buddhist chariot to reply. The Academy versus the Xiankong Temple. Mr. 13 versus the President of the Commandment Yard. Just these names were enough to shock the cultivation world. The cultivators by the mountain stream subconsciously suppressed their urge to exclaim and watched the scene nervously. Even their breathing slowed down. The confrontation between the unknown place actually happened in the mortal world. To be able to witness such a battle with their own eyes was enough to make ordinary cultivators go crazy. How could they not be excited and nervous? It was unusually quiet by the mountain stream. Only the mournful cries of the kingfishers in the bamboo forest could be heard, as well as the soft hoofbeats of the horses that were scattered on the grass. They were waiting for the deep voice to ring out from the Buddhist chariot again. They were looking forward to how the person from the Xiankong Temple in the Buddhist chariot would face the arrow from the Academy. For a long time, no sound came from the Buddhist chariot. The autumn wind ruffled the green leaves. The eminent monk of Xiankong Temple remained silent. Ning Ke asked him if he dared to take an arrow from him. The monk of Xiankong Temple did not answer. He didn't dare to. Ning Ke was not surprised by the Buddhist chariot's silence. For ordinary cultivators in the world, Xiankong Temple had a legendary status, and they had an innate reverence for it. But he came from the Academy and had seen the monks of the Xiankong Temple, so he treated them calmly. From the moment he heard the sound of the copper bell, he had been trying to determine the level of the other party's cultivation. He did not know what kind of place the Commandment Yard was, nor did he know the position of the president of the Commandment Yard in the temple. But he was sure that the president of the Commandment Yard was not as powerful as the legendary chief preaching monk of the Xiankong Temple. The Buddhism sect did not have the theory of the 5 states of cultivation, but there was the profound meaning of enlightenment. After listening to these 2 sentences, he was sure that this person from the Xiankong Temple must be someone who was enlightened. If he were to compare it to the state of cultivation, he would at least be in the knowing destiny state. If it were Ning Ke in front of the Red Lotus Temple, he would definitely turn around and run when faced with a powerhouse at the knowing destiny state. However, in that autumn rain, he had already entered the knowing destiny state. This Xiankong Temple monk's state of cultivation should be a little higher than Prince Long Qing's. But in terms of evil and horrifying skills, and in terms of cunning and practical methods, he was probably not as good as Long Qing. After Ning Ke entered the knowing destiny state, ordinary cultivators in the knowing destiny state would not be able to take on his primordial 13 arrows without preparation. Moreover, he had been silent for too long after coming to the Hua Mountain. Today, he had drawn the bow twice but had not shot it. This arrow was the one that he was most eager to shoot. If Long Qing were to reappear here, he would not be able to take on this arrow. So he was sure that the Xiankong Temple monk in the Buddhist chariot would not be able to take it either. Then the other party would not dare to take it. Looking at the Buddhist chariot that had been silent for a long time, Ning Ke said with a smile, "Since you dare not take it, then please continue to remain silent. If you dare not take it, then continue to remain silent." The kingfisher hiding in the bamboo seemed to understand Ning Ke's words. It was so frightened that it did not dare to chirp. The horses on the grassy slope also stopped in fear. It was really silent. Cuny Matty could not believe what she had seen. She even looked a little desperate. The flower addict, who had always been indifferent and ignorant, could not help but look at Ning Ke standing on the black horse carriage. Her eyes were extremely complicated. There was dead silence beside the mountain stream. Everyone present was shocked and could not believe their eyes. Because of Ning Kei's tyrannical power, and also because of the Academy's power, he had actually forced the Xiankong Temple monk to remain silent. This shocked everyone present and no one dared to respond. He has cultivated for 3 years and entered the knowing destiny state. How can there be such an unreasonable thing in the world? Qing Ziqing, the powerhouse from the Sword Garret of South Jin Kingdom, looked at Ning Kei standing on the black horse carriage against the autumn wind. He murmured in a slightly hoarse voice, "Senior brother, you once said that the headmaster of the academy is as tall as several stories. Now it seems that there is no building as tall as the headmaster of the academy in the world. What is more frightening is that there are several more tall buildings in the academy." To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian.com to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 555. The wind blew through the trees, and the mountain stream was silent. Everyone was shocked speechless. The curtains around the Buddhist chariot fluttered, and the figure in monk's robe could be vaguely seen. The high monk of Xiankong Temple remained silent. It was not until today, when he faced the cold iron arrow, that he realized that the arrow was more terrible than it was rumored to be. The bowstring divided the world before Ning Kei's eyes into two. He looked at the monk in the Buddhist chariot, which was cut by the bowstring and aimed at by the arrowhead. He said, "In the eyes of the world, Xiankong Temple is a sacred unknown place. Moreover, you are far away in the West Wilderness and rarely enter the human world, so you are even more mysterious. But you seem to have forgotten that I am from the academy. To me, Xiankong Temple is not mysterious at all. From the beginning, I knew you were from Xiankong Temple. But so what? I have seen 2 monks from Xiankong Temple. One of them was killed by me, and the other is now blind. I don't know where he is in the world. I heard that the wayfarer of the Buddhism sect once went to Chang'an. Is he your senior brother? He should be much stronger than you, but he was still driven away by my eldest brother." Hearing that Ning Kei had killed a monk from Xiankong Temple, the cultivators were even more shocked. Those from the Buddhism sect who knew the inside story of the duel in front of the bun shop on Morning Street all had complicated expressions on their faces. Cuny Maddie's face was even paler, and she seemed to be about to faint in grief. Ning Kei did not pay attention to the reactions of the people present. He looked at the monk in the Buddhist chariot and continued, "So I don't understand. Although you are the president of the commandment yard of Xiankong Temple, what gives you the confidence to talk nonsense in front of me, a disciple of the academy? What gives you the right to comment on the actions of the academy?" The academy had shocked everyone without shooting an arrow, and forced the eminent monk in the Buddhist chariot to remain silent without moving the iron bow. The academy had already gained great glory in this confrontation. Under the premise that the situation had been settled, Ning Kei's extremely arrogant question would undoubtedly humiliate the Xiankong Temple and even the entire Buddhism sect. The Tang had an unyielding temperament. They were not afraid of the bitter wine of defeat, nor would they be stingy with the pride brought by victory. This unique temperament made the Tang, whether on the battlefield or in diplomatic settings, often seem aggressive to their opponents, even somewhat crude. As for the back of the mountain of the academy, because of youngest uncle and Mr. Second's reputation, his image in the cultivation world had always been extremely arrogant. Therefore, even though the cultivators beside the stream were shocked by Ning Kei's words and even felt embarrassed for the high monk of the Xiankong Temple in the Buddhist chariot, they were not surprised. Instead, they felt that this was how the academy should behave. In fact, that was not the case. The 2 girls in the black horse carriage, who knew Ning Kei well, and the big black horse, who was in front of the carriage, all felt that Ning Kei was very different today. Ning Kei had been living in darkness and blood since he was a child. He was also very different from his peers in the academy. In Yi Hongyu's words, he was the shame of the academy. Beneath his casual appearance, Ning Ke was extremely cold-blooded. He would do whatever it took to survive, but he would never pursue the vanity brought by victory. After winning, he would not do anything that might bring danger to himself in order to show off his elegance. If it had been in the past, even if he had been in the wilderness and faced a high monk from the Xiankong temple, he would never have said such words to provoke the other party after he had won and gained benefits. This meant that as he grew up, Ning Ke had been gradually changed by the fierce Tang Feng and the powerful academy. Especially under the influence of Second Brother, he had unknowingly begun to become arrogant. Second Brother's reason was very simple. His head could be cut off and blood could flow, but the crown on his head could not be tilted at all. That would be a disgrace to the academy and a disgrace to the academy. Today in the Tile Mountain, Ning Ke did not really fight, but he had already shocked everyone. It could be said that he had not disgraced the academy, nor had he tarnished the reputation of youngest uncle. But his words were not just to show the pride of the academy. He really wanted to provoke the high monk from the Xiankong temple in the Buddhist chariot. Because when he aimed at the Buddhist chariot and shocked everyone and forced the high monk from the Xiankong temple to remain silent, he suddenly felt a chill in his body. It was a warning sign. After entering the knowing destiny state, cultivators would have a vague but real premonition of what they were going to encounter. This kind of premonition was vague and even hard to grasp, but it was enough to alert people. Ning Ke did not know what the warning sign was, but he vaguely sensed that today's trip to the Tile Mountain would bring him a lot of trouble. So he did not mind killing the strongest enemy at the beginning. More importantly, this was related to Song Song's medical treatment and vaguely pointed to the Buddhist chariot. He did not hesitate to erase the warning sign. Right now, this iron arrow contained his fullest spirit, his hungriest killing intent. He knew that if he didn't shoot this arrow, then it would be very difficult for him to shoot another arrow of the same realm today. Therefore, this was his best chance. Even so, if Ning Ke wanted to kill the high monk from the Xiankong temple, he would definitely be seriously injured or even pay a greater price. But he did not want to regret it later. There was still no response from the Buddhist chariot. One could vaguely see the high monk from the Xiankong temple sitting cross-legged behind the curtain. It seemed that he did not hear Ning Ke at all, nor was he angry. Ning Ke slightly raised his eyebrows. He thought of the characteristics of the Buddhism sect and Master Lotus's description of the Buddhism sect at the front gate of the Devil's Doctrine. He could not help but shiver. The high monk of the Buddhism sect was indeed as tolerant as a tortoise. Doing anything to the extreme meant that one was powerful. He had seen countless deaths since he was a child and knew the importance of patience. He naturally knew that the more tolerant the monk was, the more terrifying he would be. It was extremely quiet beside the stream. Some cultivators looked at Ning Ke, who was aiming at the Buddhist chariot from the black horse carriage in fear. Some cultivators looked at the Buddhist chariot nervously. No one dared to make a sound. They even deliberately slowed down their breathing, afraid that any sound would cause the string of the iron bow to loosen. The situation was extremely tense. If they did not want the academy and Xiankong temple to be killed, they needed someone to break the invisible and dangerous struggle between the black horse carriage and the Buddhist chariot. No one beside the mountain stream could avoid Ning Ke's iron arrow. But someone could stop the iron arrow, not with a flying sword or prayer beads, but with their own flesh and blood. Monk Guan Hai used his chest to block the dark iron arrow. The color of his face turned darker than the iron arrow. He said sadly, 13th brother, why do you have to do this? When Ning Ke first met this young monk in Chang'an City, he admired him. This was because this monk had the true calmness of the Buddhism sect. He did not pretend to be profound like other Vedanta of the Buddhism sect. Also, Monk Guan Hai's skin was very dark, just like Sang Sang when she was young. If it was something else, Ning Ke would naturally give face to Monk Guan Hai. But not today. He aimed the iron arrow at the Buddhist chariot. He did not even look at Guan Hai and said, "Arrows don't have eyes." Monk Guan Hai said bitterly, "An arrow has no eyes, but everyone here has eyes." The president of the commandment yard has already silently admitted defeat. "Senior brother, do you still have to shoot this arrow?" Ning Ke said, "I didn't shoot the arrow." Guan Hai sighed and said, "Then what are you waiting for?" Ning Ke said, "I am waiting for the high monk in the Buddhist chariot to stop remaining silent." Guan Hai asked, "If the master keeps silent, what are you going to do, senior brother?" Ning Ke really did not know what to do, so he kept silent. Although he was extremely vigilant towards the Buddhist chariot, and although he was the core disciple of the headmaster of the academy, he could not kill the other party with one arrow in front of so many cultivators. Sometimes, overbearingness and pride looked similar, but in fact they were not completely similar. In second brother's words, pride was reasonable overbearingness, while overbearingness was unreasonable pride. No matter if it was evil or unreasonable, second brother had always been reasonable. That was why he thought that he was proud but not overbearing. He also hoped that Ning Ke could become someone like him. Previously, the high monk from the Xiankong temple in the Buddhist chariot first criticized the academy's actions, and then reprimanded Ning Ke as a senior. No matter how Ning Ke humiliated the other party, it was reasonable and could at least pass second brother's review. Therefore, although everyone was shocked, it did not cause any criticism. But the situation now was different. The high monk from the Xiankong temple was repeatedly humiliated, but he endured it silently. He did not show any signs of anger, nor did he intend to attack. If Ning Ke forcefully shot the arrow now, in the eyes of the world, the academy would not be showing pride, but overbearingness. Monk Guan Hai looked at Ning Ke's expression and said sincerely, "Senior brother, if you insist on fighting with the president, you must kill me first." "Senior brother, don't be in a hurry to say that killing me is not a big deal. Even if you massacre the Lank Temple, you must have brought the Lady of Light to Tile Mountain today for something important. What if it comes to that?" This was not a threat, but a sincere persuasion. Not to mention that Ning Ke did not have the ability to massacre the Tile Mountain and drive the black horse carriage to the cave. Even if he was the youngest uncle back then, could he still hope that Master Qishan could cure Sang Sang after killing the monks from the Lank Temple? It was not that Ning Ke did not think of this, but he still did not understand what the warning sign that made his body suddenly turn cold when he aimed the iron arrow at the Buddhist chariot indicated. The monk from the Xiankong temple in the Buddhist chariot remained silent and did not dare to take the arrow. Then, even if they fought again in the future, the monk's Zen heart would definitely be affected when facing Ning Quebec. The high monk from the Buddhism sect was indeed powerful and terrifying, but logically speaking, he should not be an obstacle to Ning Ke's trip to the Tile Mountain today. But the warning sign still existed, and it was even getting stronger. So Ning Ke was very uneasy. This is the first chapter. The second chapter should be completed before 11:30. Yes, only I know what the warning sign is. Arrogant, overbearing. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian.com to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.